Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 376. The cat is so big that a city cannot contain it. Fairy Tales Ragnarok was eliminated by Mermaid Heel Kagura. Fairy Tales Marcus was eliminated by Blue Pegasus. Fairy Tales Alzak was eliminated by Four-Headed Hound Pacus. Fairy Tales Visca was eliminated by Boa Hancock's Jura. The four announcements caused an uproar. 4 fairy tale mages had been eliminated at the very beginning of the competition, and those who eliminated them were the leaders of the 4 previous champion guilds. Did all the major guilds think Fairy Tale was too strong and want to eliminate them first? George, upon hearing the announcements, initially had the same thought, but quickly dismissed it. Mermaid Hill aside, the leaders of Blue Pegasus and Four-Headed Hound had both been from Fairy Tale, and Blue Pegasus had a very good relationship with Fairy Tale. He had even helped heal their mages before. Given the character of their guild's mages, they wouldn't do such a thing. As for the Serpent Scale, they were also on good terms with their guild. He could tell that Jura and Leo were both proud and upright people, and wouldn't stoop to such underhanded tactics. Usually, only guilds like Sabretooth, who would stop at nothing to win, would do something like this, but this time, the other guild wasn't among them. Could it be a coincidence? Or something I don't know about? George shook his head. He couldn't guess without evidence, but he didn't care. He'd only brought the 4 of them to make up the numbers. Their elimination was fine, it saved him trouble later. Otherwise, before they joined him, he was worried about accidentally harming them with large-scale magic. Interesting, they even came looking for me. Let's see what tricks they're playing. Just as he was about to finish the battle in one go, he suddenly noticed that the mages from the other 5 champion guilds had entered his perception range and were all heading in his direction. This piqued his interest. It seemed like a premeditated attack, but he didn't know the specific reason. So he stopped looking for other mages to rack up points with and instead waited for the arrival of the other 5 champion guilds. 2 minutes later, 25 mages from the 5 champion guilds appeared before him simultaneously. George, you're strong, but how are you going to handle this situation? Minerva asked George provocatively, waving her fan and swaying her hips. George ignored her and instead looked at the leaders of the other 4 guilds. I can understand what the Swordwaist Tiger Guild is doing, but what are you doing? Think carefully about your answer, because your answer will depend on the severity of your injuries later. Someone from each of our 4 guilds went missing this morning. She threatened that if we didn't join forces to eliminate you, then, Jura's face showed a guilty expression. He didn't finish this sentence, but George already knew. It was an old trick, but very effective. Kidnapping one person from each of the 4 guilds and then using their lives to threaten Jura and the others into compromising was the most effective way to deal with good people. Aren't you afraid of being disqualified after doing this? George looked at Minerva with a hint of doubt. After the competition, Jura and the others would definitely report Minerva's actions to the royal family. Even if Sword by Tiger won first place, what would it matter? They would still be disqualified, and their reputation would be ruined. But Minerva confidently shook her head. It's all just talk. They have no evidence, and you don't need to know that much. Do you have a connections? George's eyes lit up, and he immediately had an answer. The competition had just started, and the 4 members of Leaky were eliminated. Even if Sword by Tiger threatened the other 4 guilds through kidnapping, how did they manage to locate the 4 so quickly? And how did they resolve the situation so quickly and regroup with him so fast? Considering what he did last night, there was only one truth. The royal family had intervened. The royal family must have sent someone to inform Sword by Tiger in advance about today's competition details and secretly arranged for the 4 members of Leaky to be located together with the 5 guilds. That's why Minerva said even if Jura and the others reported him, it would be useless because the royal family would side with him, and without evidence, the matter would ultimately be dropped. The royal family's purpose was simple, to use the power of the 5 major guilds mages to defeat him and then reclaim the Eclipse Gate from him. You've miscalculated, George said, a slight smile playing on his lips after understanding. The 5 major mage guilds had 25 top-tier mages, the weakest of whom were close to S rank, along with many top-tier S-rank mages and the 10 wizard saints. Even the 4 heavenly kings of Ishgir might be defeated if they joined forces. However, they were still a bit short of defeating him. He feared nothing more than a group attack in a war of attrition. Who could outlast him? Attack together. Once you eliminate him, I'll release your guild members, and then we'll fairly compete for the title of Strongest Mage Guild. Hearing George's words, "You have connections," Minerva's expression changed, and she immediately waved her fan. Jura and the others wore expressions of helplessness and guilt, but for the safety of their companions, they all activated their magic circles. "Come on then, let me eliminate you all together, it'll save us the trouble." Seeing this, George spread his wings and flew into the air, then his giant magic circle lit up. Giant magic, transformation, his body rapidly expanded in the sky above the city, from tens of centimeters to tens of meters to hundreds of meters, finally settling at a terrifying 8,000 meters. Giant magic was very useful, so he had never given up researching it. As his magic continued to improve and his magical power increased, his achievements in giant magic had long surpassed those of the old guild master, Makarov. In cat form, his maximum size could reach 8,000 meters, even larger than when he transformed into a dragon. The cat form's foundation was weaker, so the giant magic was more effective. The dragon form's body was too strong, so the effect of casting giant magic was relatively less, only reaching 5,000 meters. However, in terms of physical strength, the 8,000-meter giant cat form is still far inferior to the 5,000-meter giant dragon form. But in this world, transforming into a dragon would cause a huge sensation, so there's no need for that. This is so big. Seeing George use giant magic to grow his body to a terrifying size that blots out the sky, the mages like Minerva below and the audience in the stands were all dumbfounded. This was truly the size of a cat, a city couldn't contain it. Chapter 377 The Roar of the Evil Cat. Eliminate those small fry first. The towering George stretched out a cat paw and shoved it down at the town below. The massive paw swept across the entire simulated town in the center of the arena, causing it to collapse instantly. The weaker mages were swept away and landed in the audience. Crocodile skin, boar tusks, mammoth trunk, announcements rang out throughout the arena. George's single attack had eliminated more than a third of the mages in the arena. "We can't let him continue," Minerva, seeing George eliminate a third of the mages in one strike, snapped out of her shock and rallied everyone to attack. If they didn't deal with George soon, once he defeated more than half the mages, their score would be guaranteed to be number 1. The Minister of Defense's goal was to defeat George, ideally severely injuring him and rendering him unconscious, but her ultimate objective was to ensure Saberby Tiger Guild won first place and became the undisputed strongest mage guild. In the eyes of guild mages, the royal family does indeed hold some status, but that's about it. Unlike ordinary people, they don't feel that the royal family's status is particularly noble. Powerful mages don't really need to pay attention to the royal family, or even the Magic Council, just like the 4 heavenly kings. In a world where individuals are powerful enough to easily contend with ordinary armies, it's impossible for an absolute ruling force to be led by ordinary people. As for the Grand Magic Tournament being so popular, it's not because the royal family has a high status. People aren't participating to curry favor with the royal family. Rather, it's because all the mage guilds want to compete and demonstrate their strength. The royal family just happens to have the influence to host the tournament, which hits a nerve. Therefore, Minerva isn't afraid of the Minister of Defense, nor is she afraid of the royal family. Her dealings with the Minister of Defense are just a deal. If she doesn't win the competition, the deal is pointless. "Don't forget, your people are still in my hands." Minerva activated her magic and, noticing Jura and the others hesitant and slacking off behavior, immediately reprimanded them sternly. Jura and the others exchanged helpless glances, silently apologizing to George for the lives of their guild members, and then unleashed their magic. Demon 18 Fighting God Magic, Spatial Blast, Earth Magic, Tyrant Rock Smash, Power Fragrance, Maxmen, Fearless, Soaring Form, Drunken Fist Magic, Moonlight. The strongest mages from the 5 reigning guilds each unleashed their strongest magic at George, while the other mages followed suit, launching attacks on him. Those mages who hadn't been eliminated after George's first attack also unleashed their magic at George in the air. The biggest drawback of power magic is that while the size and strength increase, the target also becomes larger. "Let's see how you dodge this," Minerva smiled smugly as she watched countless spells rain down on George. Giant magic was indeed powerful, especially for a mage like George who had mastered it to an extremely high level. Its destructive power was astonishing. However, giant magic also has significant drawbacks. Even though gigantification greatly enhances one's defensive capabilities, this drawback remains unavoidable. In a one-on-one situation, this isn't as noticeable, one can withstand the hits. But against multiple opponents, it becomes problematic. No matter how strong your defense, you can't withstand attacks from so many different types of magic simultaneously. Therefore, using giant magic at this time is unwise. Hungarian Mirror World, seeing so many spells attacking him, George didn't panic. Instead, he used a transformation spell to conjure two enormous mirrors out of thin air and activated the mirror magic he had learned and improved in the Magic Apprentice world. He knew the drawbacks of giant magic all too well. In his dragon form, he wouldn't fear this level of concentrated attack, but in his cat form, his magic resistance was much lower, making it unsuitable for direct confrontation. A large amount of magic disappeared immediately after hitting the first mirror, then quickly emerged from the second mirror. At this moment, George secretly aimed the second mirror at the Golden Palace not far from the venue. Since the royal family had repeatedly provoked him, he had to retaliate in kind, showing them that those who dared to cause trouble would have to bear the consequences, otherwise there would be a next time, which would be very troublesome. So this time, he directly redirected all the magic attacking him towards the palace, so that even if he was blamed afterward, no one could find fault with him. After all, in the eyes of the audience, it wasn't his magic attacking the palace, but the magic of the mages below. It was just an accident. Only the royal family knew that this was actually a warning from him. A dense barrage of magic flew towards the palace, and the guards there, seeing this, hurriedly activated the palace's magical defense barrier. However, this attack came from the combined assault of the kingdom's most powerful mages. How could the palace's defensive magic barrier possibly withstand it? A sound like shattering glass rang out, the palace's magical defense barrier shattered, and then the entire palace collapsed under the residual force of the magic, turning into ruins. Seeing the distant palace collapse, the king, princess, defense minister, and other high-ranking officials, along with all the spectators and the mages who had just unleashed the magical attack, stood frozen in place. Cat's roar. George seized the opportunity, opening his cat mouth and unleashing a powerful three-colored flame towards the center of the arena below. The raging flames instantly eliminated a large number of mages, teleporting them away, leaving only top-tier S-class mages like Kagura and Jiro, as well as the 10 wizard saints. Based on the points, Fairy Tail was now firmly in first place, unless they were defeated by the others below and their points were transferred. Attack separately, from different directions, so he can't transfer his magic. We still have a chance. Minerva, looking at the remaining top-tier mages, reluctantly adjusted her strategy again, wanting to defeat George and reclaim the points. But as soon as she finished speaking, a chilling voice suddenly rang in her ears. What chance do you have? Looking up at the sky, the enormous cat had vanished. Out-of-body experience. Soul-stealing. Mind control. It turned out that George had cancelled the giant magic and teleported behind Minerva. With his superpowers and magic activated simultaneously, he began to read Minerva's memories, searching for the locations of the other 4 guild members she had imprisoned. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 A Princess as a Hostage. So they were trapped in their own space. After reading Minerva's memories, George realized that Minerva's special magic, besides transferring people and items, could also store them. And unlike the transmogrification space, Minerva's special magic could also store living beings. The members of the 4 major guilds had been knocked unconscious and trapped in her space by Minerva. Release them. Minerva, controlled by George's Soul Reaper's curse, released a magic circle, and 4 mages appeared out of thin air on the ground. Jura and the others, seeing the guild's mages released, immediately went to check on them, only to find they were merely unconscious, and breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, George. Jura and the others exchanged glances, and surprisingly, they voluntarily forfeited the match, being teleported to the outer perimeter of the arena. They forfeited partly because they felt guilty towards George and were grateful for his rescue of their companions, and partly because they genuinely felt they couldn't win. That giant magic spell was so huge, they didn't even have confidence in a one-on-one fight. And the power of that Dragon Slayer magic, he was injured to some extent after taking it, while George seemed quite relaxed, not at all like someone who had unleashed a powerful attack. Just as Jura and the others left, a figure suddenly burst from the ground, launching a sneak attack on George from behind. It was Germain, the leader of Sabretooth, Minerva's father, a master of God of War magic. Divine sharpness, however, George didn't even turn his head. He flicked his tail twice, and two invisible, elusive divine sharpnesses shot out, severing Germain's arm and leg. By reading Minerva's memories, George discovered that the Sabretooth mages weren't inherently bad, especially Minerva, who never intended to kill the 4 guild mages she had knocked unconscious. However, she had been verbally and physically abused by her father, Germain, since childhood, who constantly distorted her values and instilled in her the idea that their bloodline was the strongest, leading to her current behavior. You've lost. Even your father, who always boasted of possessing the strongest bloodline, has had an arm and a leg chopped off by me. It seems the strongest isn't you, but me, and Fairy Tail. Releasing his mental control over Minerva, George pointed at Germain, whose limbs he had severed, and floated in the air, laughing. Minerva, realizing the situation, was struck dumb. The convictions her father had instilled in her crumbled instantly. Her body went limp, and she collapsed to the ground, muttering, "This can't be, it can't be. We're the strongest, how could we lose, how could we lose? Your father lied to you. If you want to become the strongest, join us. Become a Fairy Tail mage, and you'll be the mage of the strongest guild." George flew to Minerva, coaxing her. The guild's main force hadn't been unleashed yet. Even with the magical items he provided to boost their strength, the gap between mages like Rachel and the top-tier mages was still significant. If the guild wants to solidify its title as the strongest guild and take on various missions daily, then it needs top-tier mages besides him to lead the guild. Minerva is quite good, she's not inherently bad, intelligent, and has many methods. While Germain appears to be in charge of Sabretooth, he's actually not very intelligent. Despite his ruthlessness and explosive temper, Minerva handles most of the tasks. Sabretooth was able to achieve the same score as Fairy Tail in the first 2 matches thanks to Minerva's strategic planning. If he weren't so strong, Sabretooth would definitely have won first place in this competition. Therefore, after seeing Minerva's memories, he also developed a fondness for her talent and wanted to recruit her to his guild. At the same time, he was also very interested in Minerva's special magic. Strongest. Yes. Strongest. You are the strongest, your guild is the strongest. Okay, I'll join Fairy Tail. Hearing George's words, Minerva seemed to have regained her confidence, her eyes lighting up as she stood up. Germain, having reattached his severed arms and legs, roared in fury upon hearing Minerva's words. "Minerva, how dare you betray me? I'll beat you to death, father, haven't you beaten me enough? According to you, the weak should be eliminated. Since you're so weak, you should have been eliminated long ago." Minerva walked up to Germain and kicked him away. Her strength had long surpassed Germain's, and due to the beliefs instilled in her since childhood and Germain's actions towards her, she felt no affection for this father. Even if Germain were killed, she wouldn't feel anything. Making Germain the team leader was merely a way to push him into the limelight, which would be more beneficial for the competition and the guild's future development. The match. The competition is over. Fairy Tail has the highest score and wins the title of strongest guild in this Grand Magic Games. The host, looking at the shattered center of the venue and the collapsed royal palace in the distance, stammered for a long time before finally announcing the result. The audience, after realizing what had happened, collectively stood up and cheered wildly. So what if the palace collapsed? It wasn't their house that collapsed, they could just rebuild it. Seeing such a spectacular match made this a lifetime worthwhile. The third major battle ended, with Fairy Tail leading Sabretooth by over 140 points, securing the title of strongest guild and a prize of 30 million. At the awards ceremony, the king, who had been absent until now, finally appeared with his princess, presenting the gleaming prize money to George. However, while the process appeared joyful on the surface, it was anything but harmonious. Last night you sent people to attack me, and today you joined forces with Sabretooth to target our guild. Do you think I wouldn't dare kill? Believe me, I can make you, your daughter, and your ministers disappear from this world as silently as that palace." As the king presented the trophy, George's voice suddenly echoed in his mind, and cold sweat instantly broke out on his face. "I knew nothing about today's events. It was the Minister of Defense who did it on his own. I'm giving you the Eclipse Gate. I hope you won't hold it against me anymore. I know it wasn't your order, otherwise, it wouldn't just be the palace that collapsed." Before transmitting his thoughts, he had already used his mental abilities on the king, who couldn't use magic, and knew that the king had actually decided last night to give up the Eclipse Gate and its contents, but the princess and the Minister of Defense were unwilling to accept it. "The Eclipse Gate won't be returned to you. Also, I want the princess to join our guild. She can only return to the capital after the lunar eclipse ends in 7 years. Chapter 379 Expanding the Guild. What? This is unacceptable. The king was shocked. He only had one daughter, the sole heir to the kingdom. How could she join the mage guild and become a mage? It was too dangerous. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to her, nor will I let her go on dangerous missions. You can send people to protect her, or to guide her in learning the knowledge necessary for inheriting the throne, but she cannot leave the guild. If you don't agree, then I will assume you intend to target me again. In that case, I will only have one choice, to kill you and your daughter first, then slaughter all the high-ranking officials in the kingdom. Anyway, once you're dead, a new royal family will always emerge." George, outwardly raising the trophy and affectionately standing on the king's shoulder with his arm around the king's neck, sent chills down the king's spine through his telepathic messages. "Or you can expose what you've done and call on everyone to come against me. But I believe they won't side with you, and even if they do, they combined can't defeat me. The outcome will be the same." There were two main reasons for getting the princess to join the guild. First, the kingdom's princess had joined a mage guild, the strongest guild in this year's Grand Mage Tournament, which would inevitably expand the guild's influence, attracting more high-quality mages and bringing in more quests. Second, having the princess join the guild meant he had essentially gained a hostage. Directly annihilating the royal family was unrealistic and would incite public outrage. Once back, he would likely be engrossed in magic research and wouldn't care much about guild affairs. Any further royal antics would disrupt his studies. But with a royal heir in hand, he believed they wouldn't dare cause trouble again unless they wanted the royal line to end. "Hello, I can agree, but I also hope you keep your promise." The king's expression shifted repeatedly, finally forcing a stiff smile as he agreed. He had no choice, he dared not refuse. "I have one more announcement to make." After the awards ceremony, the king took a deep breath, snatched a microphone from the host, and addressed all the participating mages and audience members. "From today onwards, my daughter, Emerald E. Fiore, will join the Fairy Tale Guild for 7 years of training. 7 years later, I will officially pass the throne to Emerald E. Fiore." The king wasn't foolish. He worried that George might break the agreement, so he specifically set the abdication date 7 years later. This way, everyone would know that the princess would return to the capital to inherit the throne in 7 years, and George couldn't possibly stop her. George, however, smiled upon hearing this, thinking it was even better. Knowing that the future king had joined the Fairy Tale Guild would only enhance the publicity. Sure enough, upon hearing the king's words, a murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Fairy Tale is truly amazing. Even the princess has joined their guild, truly worthy of being the strongest guild. For ordinary people, royalty was undoubtedly the most prestigious, far surpassing even mages. Hearing that the future king, now a princess, was going to join the Fairy Tale Guild, how could they not be astonished? "Father, why?" The princess was also completely bewildered. She didn't understand why her father would make such an absurd decision. However, she was interrupted by the king's stern gaze before she could finish her question. "Very well, it seems you are very sincere. As long as your royal family doesn't do anything against me or the guild again, the princess will be safe for the next 7 years. I said it." George's face showed satisfaction. "By the way, I heard your palace accidentally collapsed." The king's lips twitched. He wanted to say, "Wasn't it you who caused it?" but considering George's strength, he could only nod in the end. "You should know that I was originally famous for my restoration magic. I can restore a collapsed palace, saving you a lot of money on repairs. How about it?" George transmitted his voice again as the award ceremony ended and the king prepared to leave the stage. The king's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this. What are the conditions? Hosting the Grand Magic Games had already drained the royal family's finances considerably. Rebuilding the palace would indeed put pressure on their coffers. He didn't want to impose additional taxes on his subjects. He's still a good king. George, sensing the king's thoughts, nodded inwardly. Putting aside the past, during the old king's reign, the people of the entire kingdom of Theory had fared well, making him a very responsible king. It's simple. I want to see all the magic books and the Magic Development Bureau and the Royal Library. Going to see them himself wouldn't be legitimate, and he might not even be able to find some core, hidden spells. But if the king personally approved, it would be a different story. The king nodded almost without hesitation. All right, that's not a problem. For the king, the magic books passed down through generations were certainly important, but George was just looking at them. He wasn't stealing them. As for whether this would increase George's strength, no one could defeat him now. A slight increase wouldn't matter. It's like facing someone with a gun, unarmed. Whether they have a pistol or a submachine gun doesn't matter. Killing you is just a matter of one bullet. Excellent. George flapped his wings and flew from the podium to the collapsed palace, beginning to cast a restoration spell. Restored to its original state, his research into time magic had given him a deeper understanding of the restoration spell. He felt that if he could master time magic, the restoration spell might not only repair objects but also people. The essence of the restoration spell is time reversal. If you rewind the time of an injured or even dead person to when they were alive, isn't that a form of restoration? So, he's that restoration mage. The participating mages and spectators, seeing George fly to the palace and cast his spell, and the palace restored to its original state in just a few seconds, remembered that fairy tale once had a famous restoration mage. However, they didn't know that the restoration mage was actually a cat, and that this cat was incredibly powerful. After the awards ceremony, it was already noon. George was preparing to head to the Magic Development Bureau in the capital when Minerva led a few people to their dormitory. I want to bring them into the guild. Rufus Noah, Ogananagel, and Yukino Aguirre. No problem. You take them inside to find Macau. These three were none other than the other three participants from Saberby Tiger. He had even defeated Oga in an instant. All three were quite strong. They were worth taking in. Chapter 382 Dragons join the guild. Oga, needless to say, uses lightning god slaying magic. Joining him will allow him to research it. Rufus uses ancient memory manifestation magic, a unique technique that can materialize memorized magic and objects, and also add his own understanding to create new magic. His strength is second only to Minerva and Germaine, approaching that of a top-tier S-class mage. Yukino, a celestial spirit mage like Lucy, possesses 2 golden keys and is also at half the strength of an S-class mage. To open the Eclipse Gate, he needs 12 golden keys. According to Markeo, Lucy already has 10 golden keys after defeating the Oracion Cease, making a total of 12 with Yukino's 2. Minerva is sent to take the 3 to the current guild master Markeo to complete the formalities, while George goes to the Magic Development Bureau to begin replicating magic. The Magic Development Bureau and the library have more spellbooks than Fairy Tale. He didn't plan to read them all so quickly, so he intended to use a copying charm to make copies and take them back to the guild to read at his own pace, which would also increase the guild's collection. He had promised the king he wouldn't take the books away, but he hadn't said he wouldn't make copies. In the evening, George had just returned to his dormitory when Macau came to him. Guildmaster, besides the 4 you approved, quite a few people applied to join the guild today. I've registered all their information. What do you think? The mages who came to the capital weren't just guild members, there were also many lone mages who hadn't joined guilds. It was normal for them to want to join after seeing Fairy Tale's strength. This was also within George's expectations. Let me see. He took the registration information from Macau and quickly looked through it. Huh? These 2 kids, most of the mages applying to join the guild were of average strength, which was normal. Many of the stronger mages had already joined major guilds and forces, so there weren't many leftovers. However, 2 children still caught his attention. The 2 children were only 12 years old and not very strong, but they had filled in Dragon Slayer magic in their magic field. One was named Stinyakrif, and his field showed light attribute Dragon Slayer magic. The other was named Roger Cheney, and his field showed shadow attribute Dragon Slayer magic. Take me to meet all the mages who applied to join the guild this time. Dragon Slayer mages are all potential stars. Once they develop, their later strength won't be too bad, at least S rank. If the two children didn't have any major problems, he would definitely recruit them into his guild. However, based on his current understanding, Dragon Slayer mages are either born through magic taught by a dragon or through the implantation of Dragon Slayer crystals. The two children's information showed that they were orphans, which piqued his interest. If it was the former, was the dragon who taught the two children magic still alive? If it was the latter, how did the two children obtain Dragon Slayer crystals, and who helped them implant them? Led by Mikau, George arrived at the inn rented by Fairy Tail and met a group of mages who wanted to apply to join the guild. It's George. I can't believe such a small cat has such power. The mages immediately erupted in excitement upon seeing George at the inn. After the Grand Mage showdown, George had become an idol not only for many ordinary people but also for many mages, a role model to emulate. There are even two Beyonders. He quickly spotted two children radiating dragon aura, along with the two kittens they were holding. Although he hadn't experienced the Atlas incident due to a century-long mission in the northern continent, he had heard about it from Markeo. It turned out that Fairy Tail wasn't just one world, there were other parallel universes. He and Happy both came from the parallel world Atlas, and were Beyonders there. The Queen of the Beyonders foresaw a future catastrophe for her race and, for the sake of its survival, sent 100 eggs to this world. Wendy's cat, Charlene, who later joined the Dragon Slayer mage team, and Happy, along with his own body, were all within those 100 eggs. Charlene was even the princess of her race. The cats in the two children's hands were probably also derived from those 100 eggs. Quiet, George uttered the word quiet, and the noisy mages immediately found themselves unable to make a sound in the inn. This was a modified spell George had created by combining the three-dimensional text magic of this world with the quiet card being researched in Sakura's world. It could suppress sound transmission within a certain range. I know you all want to join a guild, but as the strongest guild, Fairy Tail has requirements for recruiting mages. Hearing George's words, the mages' faces immediately showed tension. Most guilds recruit mages based on strength, and their strength was quite average. In a moment, you'll line up and enter the room one by one for me to assess you. But don't worry, our standards aren't just about strength, we also consider potential and mental fortitude. Strength is certainly the most important criterion, but strength also has current and future potential. Some people are currently quite strong, but they are already quite old, and are not as strong as younger mages whose strength hasn't yet developed, such as those two Dragon Slayer mages. Some people have vile personalities, committing murder and arson, joining the guild with impure motives. Such people are naturally unacceptable. His testing method is simple. He directly reads memories and provides an assessment based on them. He dispelled the silence spell, returned the data to Mikau, and instructed him to arrange for the registered mages to line up. George then went to a temporary room in the inn to begin the initiation examination. From today onward, all new mages would undergo his memory check. Of course, the mages didn't know George was checking their memories. To them, it seemed like George had simply placed a cat paw on their foreheads. Pass, fail, 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 pass. Half an hour later, it was finally the turn of the two Dragon Slayer mage children. Pass. After testing the two children's memories, George was stunned for a while before giving the answer. Watching the two children happily leave the room, he muttered to himself, I never expected something like this. No wonder Natsa couldn't leave that magical barrier last time. They're actually over 400 years old. By examining the two children's memories, he discovered a shocking secret. Chapter 381 The Truth Hidden for 400 Years. What did George see in the two children's memories? It turns out that over 400 years ago, Rogue and Sting were chosen by a celestial spirit mage named Anna Hartfilia to join a time travel project. Natsu, Gajeel, and Wendy were also chosen. Anna was responsible for teaching the 5 children language, culture, and knowledge, while 5 dragons, Fire Dragon, Sky Dragon, Iron Dragon, Shadow Dragon, and White Dragon, taught them Dragon Slayer magic. Their goal was to travel through the Eclipse Gate to 400 years in the future to defeat the Black Dragon Ikrogia. Before the journey, the Shadow Dragon and White Dragon, having reached the end of their lives, transformed themselves into Dragon Slayer crystals and implanted them into Rogue and Sting, sealing their memories using Dragon Soul technique. The Fire Dragon, Sky Dragon, and Iron Dragon, on the other hand, hid themselves within Natsu, Wendy, and Gajeel to prevent them from becoming dragons, similarly sealing their memories. After completing this, Anna used the 12 golden keys to open the Eclipse Gate. When the two children awoke, they were 400 years in the future and did not see Anna or Natsu. Only fragmented memories of White Dragon, Shadow Dragon, Natsu, and Gadget remained in their minds. It seems the Eclipse Gate really can travel through time. Combining the two children's memories, he estimated that Anna and the 5 children were separated during the time travel. Natsu landed near Fairy Tail and joined the group. Gadget landed near Phantom Lord and joined them. Wendy was found by Mystigan and taken to the Cat Lodge. Sting and Rogue landed together and wandered around, eventually meeting 2 Beyonders who became their companions. After witnessing the Grand Magician's martial arts tournament, they wanted to join Fairy Tail. As for Anna, her current whereabouts were unknown. I'll look for her after I'm done with this. Although he knew Natsu and the others' backgrounds, he didn't plan to look for Anna now. Natsu and the others were sealed inside the fairy sphere, and he couldn't use the Eclipse Gate until the lunar eclipse. Anna's goal was to defeat Acnologia, and he also planned to defeat Acnologia, but not now. He didn't have the strength yet. His immediate priority was to return to the guild as quickly as possible, process all the magic he had acquired, and then continue analyzing the fairy sphere. Finding Anna would be easy, a tracking charm would suffice. After spending 2 more days in the capital, copying all the spellbooks, George led the original and new members of Fairy Tail, along with the princess and her guards, back to Magnolia City in a grand procession. Next, he began equipping the Fairy Tail mages with the standardized magical items he had created: portkeys, spatial boxes, wands, invisibility cloaks, and iron monsters, modifying their weapons. Once the guild was fully operational, he immersed himself in the basement, once again beginning his secluded magical research, handing over the guild to Mikau and Minerva for joint management. Meanwhile, in the Harry Potter world, it was the end of the 2nd semester of the 2nd year. With double time thanks to the time manager, a foundation of magical knowledge from other worlds, and extra tutoring from Dumbledore and Snape, George had learned almost everything he could about magic and alchemy. However, his knowledge of herbs and potions, which were not applicable in other worlds, was rather limited. This was because the herbs of this world didn't exist in other worlds, and even if he learned them, he couldn't concoct the corresponding potions in other worlds. Crucially, through learning magical knowledge from different worlds, he felt that the effects of those potions could actually be achieved with magic. He figured he'd rather spend all his time on magic and alchemy. Of course, by generally he meant he hadn't devoted much effort to in-depth study, but by the standards of a school student, he was top-notch. He had a photographic memory, making rote memorization of herbs a piece of cake, and potion making, which relied heavily on memory and steady hands, equally easy. Because he was focused on magic and alchemy, he hadn't paid any attention to Hermione and Harry this semester. Even when they came to him to discuss Sirius Black, he just gave them a few perfunctory replies. "George, I have nothing more to teach you, at least not in magic and alchemy." A few nights before the final exams, in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore looked at George with astonishment in his eyes. He thought he and Grindelwald were already quite talented, but he never expected George to far surpass them. In just 1 year, George had learned all of Dumbledore's knowledge about magic and alchemy. Many concepts were easily understood after only one explanation, and George could even apply them to other situations. Next, you need to let time slowly settle and gradually put this knowledge into practice. Practice this knowledge. After listening to Dumbledore's words, George fell into deep thought. Actually, he had practiced magic and alchemy quite a bit in other worlds, but he knew that wasn't what Dumbledore meant. Practice wasn't just about repeated use and rehearsals. He had learned a great deal of magic and alchemy at Hogwarts from Dumbledore, and had been using it in other worlds, but those were other worlds. For example, he learned all the cooking techniques from a top Chinese chef, then opened a restaurant abroad, constantly improving his culinary skills. He also learned many techniques and knowledge of Western cuisine. He has surpassed his master in overall culinary skills, but in Chinese cuisine alone, he still lags far behind. His master, in his youth, worked in various restaurants, honing his skills against top Chinese chefs across the country, which led to his current achievements. If he wants to absorb this knowledge, he must follow the same path as his master, immersing himself in the Chinese culinary world and learning from various masters to truly utilize the acquired knowledge and even reach a higher level in Chinese cuisine. Therefore, although his overall magical ability far surpasses Dumbledore's, within the magical system of this world, he is still inferior to Dumbledore. To break through, Simply staying at Hogwarts is not enough. He needs to venture out and experience the wider magical world, exchanging ideas with other renowned and capable wizards. Wizards like Ron's father, skilled in alchemy, while Weasley's alchemy is not as advanced as Dumbledore's, it has its own unique strengths. Sharing knowledge and experiences would definitely improve his alchemy skills. Headmaster, I would like to apply for early graduation to intern at the Ministry of Magic, so that I can gain experience and digest what I have learned. First, I would go to the British Ministry of Magic, and once I had absorbed and digested the knowledge, I would move on to other ministries of magic, and then travel the world, trying to master as much magic as possible in each world. Chapter 382 The Ultimate Wizard Examination. Graduating early is no problem, and I'll write you a letter of recommendation. But whether you can get into the Ministry of Magic depends on their response. You have the strength and ability, but you're still too young. Dumbledore wasn't too surprised by George's decision. He also felt that if George continued to stay at Hogwarts, his progress would be slowed down. But George was still a child, and he would be happier studying and living at school. Graduating so early to go out and gain experience seemed a bit cruel. So in the end, it was up to George to choose. The only thing that surprised him was that George actually wanted to enter the Ministry of Magic immediately after graduation. The Ministry of Magic usually only admits the most outstanding students from the school. George was definitely the most outstanding student in Hogwarts history, but his age was a big problem. George was only 12 years old this year and hadn't taken the Owl and Newt exams. Even though he had some reputation in France, without these qualifications, it would be difficult. He could only say that he would try his best to use his connections to help, but whether he could get in depended on the situation. The Ministry of Magic wasn't like it used to be. Sometimes his words didn't carry much weight. Headmaster, the 7th year Newt exams should be starting soon. I wonder if I could be included, George asked after a moment's thought. The Newt exams, also known as the final wizarding exams, are a crucial exam for 7th year students at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, directly impacting their employment prospects after graduation. The Ministry of Magic requires at least excellent or good grades in 5 Newt exams to even consider admission. If he could achieve excellent grades in all 5 Newt exams, no one could object to his qualification. With Headmaster Dumbledore's recommendation, Snape's connections, and his own connections within the Ministry, plus some extra effort to make the Minister of Magic feel honored to admit him, things should be much easier. Good idea. With your abilities, you should do well, which will significantly increase your chances of admission, Dumbledore nodded. Making an exception and including George in the final wizarding exams wasn't difficult for him, the headmaster. He was also confident in George's performance. After discussing graduation with Dumbledore for a while, George left the headmaster's office. Looks like we need to catch Sirius. Sirius has been on the run from Azkaban for almost a year, and the Ministry of Magic still hasn't succeeded in capturing him. He's even managed to infiltrate the school. The wizarding world is very unhappy with Minister Cornelius Fudge, and Fudge himself is furious about the situation. If George were to personally capture Sirius and hand him over to the Ministry, he would undoubtedly gain Fudge's favor and spread his reputation throughout the British wizarding world, thus making it easier to join the Ministry. As for Sirius's innocence, it's simple. As long as he doesn't let him escape, his name will be cleared. He needs to plan this carefully. I'll deal with it after the Ultimate Wizarding exams. The Ultimate Wizarding exams are only a few days away, and he plans to deal with Sirius after the exams. Late at night, George stealthily flew out of the castle, disappearing instantly after leaving the school's anti-apparition distance. He reappeared at the door of a detached house in a London neighborhood. Ding dong. After ringing the doorbell several times, a sleepy-eyed woman rubbed her eyes and opened the door. Who's looking for me so late? Good evening, Teacher Amy. George waved with a smile. Indeed, he was looking for Amy, the temporary apparition teacher he had hired, now the deputy director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation at the Ministry of Magic. In Paris, because George had subdued the old one-eyed man, cleared Amy's name, and helped her obtain the Medal of Valor, Amy had been appointed deputy director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation before even returning. The two had been corresponding throughout the year, so George knew Amy's address and that she was doing quite well at the Ministry of Magic. The Department of International Magical Cooperation was primarily responsible for communication with other national ministries of magic, especially the French Ministry of Magic, which was the closest. Amy's girlfriend, Lena, is now the captain of the Order Corps in Paris, France, and a recipient of the French Order of Valor, so her work is naturally going very smoothly. Moreover, the years of experience have made Amy more worldly and less rigid than before. George, long time no see. You've grown so much, you're almost as tall as me. Seeing George, Amy's face immediately lit up with surprise, and she opened her arms to hug him. Although only a year had passed, George's growth rate was much faster than normal due to his continuous creation of clones and enhancements to his physique. Just looking at his height, he was already comparable to 4th or 5th year wizards. Teacher Amy's figure is getting better and better too. Feeling the amazing elasticity, George casually joked. Is it as good as mine? At this moment, a jade-like arm wrapped around Amy's waist, revealing a somewhat languid woman. Long time no see, George. Lena, you're here too. George wasn't too surprised to see Lena. Lena's face showed a hint of resentment. Your teacher, Amy, is too busy to come to Paris to see me, so I had to come to her. Haha, come in first. George, you're here so late, it must be something important, right? Seeing the situation was getting tense, Amy quickly laughed it off and pulled George into the house. Sitting on the sofa, George didn't waste any words and directly stated the purpose of his visit. I'm applying for early graduation at the end of this semester, and I'm preparing to join the Ministry of Magic. I need you to help me with that, graduate. George, if I remember correctly, aren't you a second-year student this year? Hearing George's words, Amy and Lena almost spat out a tea they had just drunk. George smiled. It's second year, but I've already finished the school curriculum ahead of schedule. I want to gain some experience at the Ministry of Magic. Don't worry, Dumbledore has agreed. He'll write me a letter of recommendation, and I'll be taking the final wizard exam in a few days, so my academic qualifications are fine. You're amazing. Hearing George's words, Amy and Lena couldn't help but give him a thumbs up simultaneously. They knew George was a genius, but they hadn't expected him to be so talented that even Dumbledore thought he could graduate early. Most wizards spend 7 years learning without truly understanding, but George had mastered it in 2. Indeed, last summer, George single-handedly defeated the infamous One-Eyed Wizard. He was no ordinary person. Chapter 383 The Tycoon George. Don't worry, leave it to me, Amy patted her chest and readily agreed. Without George, she'd still be running her crash course in Diagon Alley, living a life of debauchery and unable to resolve her inner turmoil. So, as long as George wasn't guilty of anything heinous, she'd help him no matter what. Besides, even Dumbledore had written a letter of recommendation. George was just too talented and underage. It wasn't a big deal. Take this, use it to grease the wheels. George took out a box from his special storage, filled with galleons, totaling 5,000. George, you underestimate me. This is nothing, I can handle it myself. Seeing George take out so much money, Amy quickly waved her hand, thinking he was making a mountain out of a molehill. 5,000 galleons, even if you were nobody, with terrible grades, you could buy a spot on the Ministry of Magic. What I need isn't to start from the bottom, but a position with some real power, one that allows me to access many elite wizards and the magic of the Ministry of Magic. Spending a little more money on bribing them is never a bad thing. Don't worry, 5,000 galleons is just small change for me, George patiently explained. He didn't want to be a menial worker at the Ministry of Magic. His goal was to work there, meet more outstanding wizards, and learn about some of the Ministry's core alchemy and magic to improve himself. Therefore, he definitely needed a certain level of power and status. Ideally, it would be a department he liked. As for galleons, aside from the legacy left to him by the Dark Wizard, he hadn't been idle these past 2 years. As a master of magical creatures who could communicate with magical creatures and instantly kill dragons, George could obtain many extremely rare materials if he wanted to. The simplest example was the venom of the octopod spider. A pint, or 500 milliliters, could sell for 100 galleons. There was a group of them in the Forbidden Forest, and he would go there every now and then to communicate with them, then take away a large barrel of venom. Later, once his apparition range was long enough to prevent overselling and price drops, he would travel to other countries' magical districts to sell his items, then apparate back afterward, saving time. He also amassed quite a few other rare magical creature materials. So, excluding the house he inherited from the Dark Wizard, his galleon savings alone filled his warehouse, making him a super rich tycoon in the wizarding world. A mere 5,000 galleons was nothing. Under George's persuasion, Amy finally accepted the box of galleons. In the Ministry of Magic now, getting promoted, especially to a position with real power, wasn't like before. It wasn't just about ability and talent anymore. You needed connections and money to pave the way. Then I won't disturb you two any longer. After the deal was settled, George smiled, raised an eyebrow, and apparated away. The day before the exam, Hogwarts Library. George was preparing for tomorrow's ultimate wizarding exam at Hogwarts. 7th year students don't have final exams, there's only the ultimate wizarding exams, which students can choose to take or not. It doesn't affect graduation. The ultimate wizarding exams are not easy for ordinary young wizards, and they also significantly impact a wizard's future employment. There are 12 ultimate wizarding exams: defense against the dark arts, potions, transfiguration, history of magic, charms, astronomy, herbalism, ancient runes, divination, protection of magical creatures, arithmetic divination, and muggle studies. Students can choose how many to take. There's no requirement to take all. However, to improve his resume, he had Dumbledore register him for all of them. The other 11 were no problem for him. The only one causing him some trouble was divination. This subject is entirely mystical. There's no real divination magic in this world. Wizards who can divine and predict the future, like Grindelwald and Professor Sybil, possess innate abilities. The divination spells in textbooks are completely useless once you learn them. So he hadn't even looked at it before, and had been cramming on this knowledge for the past 2 days. Fortunately, it wasn't difficult to get a high score in this course. It was mostly theoretical knowledge. If you memorized the textbook and related magic books, getting a perfect score was basically no problem. I can't believe I missed the happy charm. I bet it'll be on the exam. Professor Flitwick hinted that it would. While George was memorizing the magic book about divination, Hermione, Harry, and Ron also arrived at the library, but Hermione was clearly very agitated. How could you forget? You were with us when we got to the classroom door. Harry and Ron were puzzled by Hermione's complaint. They felt that Hermione had been in a state they couldn't understand all year. Hermione had signed up for almost every course, but many of the class times were clearly conflicting. If she attended one, she couldn't attend another. She would also mysteriously disappear and reappear, saying things they couldn't understand. Forget it, I can't explain it to you guys, Hermione sighed, then immediately ran over to George and sat down beside him, complaining, George, I slept in a little longer and missed Professor Flitwick's charms class. She had promised Professor McGonagall not to tell anyone about the time turner, including Harry and Ron, so they didn't understand her current situation. Only George, who also possessed a time turner, could understand her feelings. The happiness charm was invented by a wizard named Felix Summerby. It makes people happy. If I remember correctly, on the third shelf, there's a book called How to Quickly Calm Your Angry Lover, which explains the happiness charm in great detail. Maybe it will be useful to you. After Hermione finished speaking, George looked up with a smile. Hermione's eyes lit up immediately. That's great, thank you, George. There are magic books like that? I'll recommend my father buy one next time, so we'll get scolded less. Ron and Harry sat down opposite George. George, you're already reading 7th grade books, even divination. In their eyes, Hermione was already quite impressive, always managing to finish the next year's textbooks ahead of time. But George was even more extraordinary, already reading 7th grade textbooks in 2nd grade. Because I have my Newt's exam tomorrow, and I haven't finished the divination section yet. What? Hermione, who had just returned with her spellbook, hadn't even had a chance to sit down when George's words shocked her so much that she jumped up on the spot. Chapter 384 The Youngest Graduate. What are Newts? Seeing Hermione's surprised expression, Harry looked bewildered. Although he had been at Hogwarts for almost 3 years, there were still many basic magical facts he didn't understand. Unlike Ron, who had been exposed to magic from a young age, he wasn't as studious or bookish as Hermione. The Newts are exams that 7th-year wizards take to graduate. Percy has been preparing for them recently. He says this exam is the moment that changes a wizard's destiny. Whether or not they can get into the Ministry of Magic depends entirely on this exam, but George is only a 2nd-year wizard. Why does he need to take an exam that only 7th-year wizards take? Harry turned to look at George, as did Ron, and Hermione was practically face-to-face with him. Seeing this, George closed his book and explained, because I applied to Dumbledore for early graduation, and Dumbledore agreed. Early graduation. This time, The three of them exclaimed simultaneously, attracting the curious gazes of the other wizards in the library. George nodded. Yes, the studies here at school aren't helping me anymore. I want to graduate early and gain experience at the Ministry of Magic to improve myself. Hearing George's explanation, Harry, Hermione, and their friends were stunned for a moment before reacting. They looked at each other, unsure what to say. If any other wizard had said this, they would have thought it was arrogant, claiming that studying at Hogwarts was no longer helpful. But this was George, the George who overshadowed all geniuses, the George for whom even Dumbledore had agreed to let him take the Newt's exams and graduate early. So, will we never see you again? Hermione's face showed a hint of reluctance. She felt the little flame of love that had just ignited in her heart was about to be extinguished. No, I'm just graduating, not dying. We can still get together during your holidays, George casually reassured her. If he joined the Ministry of Magic, he might even represent the Ministry at Hogwarts again next year at the Goblet of Fire. By the way, have you noticed any trace of Sirius lately? No, that damn guy. I wonder where he's hiding. Harry's face immediately lit up with anger. Ever since he learned that Sirius had betrayed his parents, leading to their murder and leaving him an orphan, he had hated Sirius to the core. I recently invented a new tracking charm that might be able to pinpoint Sirius's location. Let's try it out after the exams. George's eyes lit up, laying the groundwork for capturing Sirius. Harry became excited upon hearing this. Really can we find Sirius's location? I can only say we'll try, and I haven't perfected it yet. We'll talk about it again in the next couple of days. George didn't give a definitive answer. The next day, in the morning, in the Great Hall. George, it's almost time for class. Why aren't you leaving yet? The second-year Slytherin students, having finished breakfast and preparing to leave for their classrooms, were surprised to find George still sitting there, leisurely eating his breakfast, without getting up. Normally, they would have long since disappeared by this time. You guys go ahead, I have an exam today, George said with a smile and a wave. What exam? Aren't the final exams still a week away? The young wizards looked puzzled. It's about time. George put down his pumpkin porridge and got up to walk towards the seventh-year wizards. The ultimate wizarding exams were held a week earlier than the regular final exams for the young wizards, and the proctors included school professors and Ministry of Magic staff. If the headmaster hadn't told me this morning, I really wouldn't have believed you were taking the Newt's exams with us, the seventh-year Slytherin prefect said with a sigh, seeing George arrive. Come on, let's go to the exam hall, it starts in half an hour. He's taking the seventh-year Newt's exams. Seeing George leave with his seventh-year students, all the young wizards who hadn't yet left the Great Hall were in an uproar. And soon, the news spread throughout the entire school. Meanwhile, everyone learned that George's purpose in taking the Newt's exams was to graduate early. So, in the following days, the school became lively again, following Sirius's intrusion. Everyone was speculating about how many excellent and good grades George would get, whether he would graduate successfully, or whether he would fail all his exams and end up in a sorry state. Several young wizards even started betting on this. George didn't care. The bigger the commotion, the better the outcome, which would help him get a job at the Ministry of Magic. Don't underestimate these young wizards at school. Many of their parents have high status in the wizarding world. 3 days later, when George and the other seventh-year wizards finished their last exam and walked out of the classroom, a large number of young wizards who had rushed over after class were already waiting outside. There were Hermione, Harry, Ginny, and others, as well as Slytherin classmates and many others who were just there to watch the spectacle. If George could achieve a good result in the ultimate wizarding exams and graduate early, he would be the youngest graduate in Hogwarts history, a place recorded in Hogwarts annals. As wizards from Slytherin, Slytherin would also feel proud. No problem, George gave an oak sign, and everyone smiled. George, is your new tracking spell ready? After everyone dispersed, Harry, and their friends pulled George aside, asking expectantly. Almost, we can try it out. George waved his hand, and 4 pieces of paper, blue, white, red, and black, inscribed with spell symbols flew out and floated on the ground. A large circle then formed beneath the 4 pieces of paper. Rational 4 circle. The tracking spells he had used before were all from this world, and wizards in this world had anti-tracking spells specifically designed to prevent being tracked. The Ministry of Magic had no shortage of experts proficient in tracking spells, but they still couldn't find Sirius's location. It could only be said that Sirius was extremely skilled at anti-tracking spells. The rational force circle he was using now wasn't a tracking spell from this world, but rather from the world of Academy City, belonging to the Puritan tracking magic. Therefore, Sirius couldn't detect it or use the corresponding anti-spell to block the tracking. Found him. Near the Whomping Willow, George quickly located Sirius's hiding place inside Hogwarts Castle. He seems to be trying to leave the school. You go and inform the professor, I'll go stop him. He said this to Harry and the others, half-jokingly, and before they could reply, he spread his wings and flew towards the Whomping Willow. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Capturing Sirius. George had indeed found Sirius's location, but he wasn't trying to escape. He was probably resting in the secret passage beneath the Whomping Willow. However, if he didn't say that, the clever and rational Hermione would definitely suggest reporting to the teachers first, and then having them capture Sirius. That would be safer. But if they did that, they would only provide clues, not actually capture Sirius. He wanted to take down Sirius single-handedly, which would be helpful for his later recruitment into the Ministry of Magic. Won't it be dangerous for George to go alone? That's Sirius. Ron's face showed tension as he watched George fly away. Currently, the only one who could escape Azkaban while under the guard of Dementors, the Ministry of Magic had been chasing him for a year without finding a trace, and he had even infiltrated Hogwarts twice. Oh, damn it, Scabbers, what are you doing? Just then, Scabbers, the pet he was holding, suddenly bit him, fell to the ground, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Forget about that rat, Hermione snapped when Ron tried to chase after Scabbers. Let's split up. I'll go find Professor McGonagall, you go find Professor Snape, and Harry will go find Headmaster Dumbledore. The sooner we get to help George, the safer he'll be. Although she'd witnessed George's power in Paris, Sirius Black was far more formidable than the old one-eyed man, and she was worried. She also knew that even if they went to help now, they'd only cause trouble. The wisest course of action was to follow George's instructions and notify the teachers immediately. Let's go. Harry gritted his teeth and ran towards the headmaster's office. He really wanted to go with George to deal with Sirius, ideally by casting a killing curse on him, even though he didn't know how yet. But Hermione was right, he should go find Dumbledore. However, just as they turned to split up and head towards the headmaster's and headmaster's offices, they bumped into a figure. Harry, Hermione, Ron, where are you three rushing off to? Professor Lupin. The three looked up and saw Professor Lupin, who had nearly stumbled from their collision, and their faces lit up with surprise. Professor, George used his self-created tracking magic to find Sirius near the Whomping Willow. He's already gone after him to prevent him from escaping. What? Sirius is at the Whomping Willow. Lupin's expression changed, as if he'd realized something, and he quickly ran towards the Whomping Willow. Professor Lupin's gone. Should I go and tell Professor Snape? Ron hesitated as he watched Lupin dash off. Mainly, he didn't want to go looking for the intimidating Professor Snape alone. I'm going with the professor. Harry hesitated for a moment, then drew his wand and chased after Professor Lupin. He didn't want to capture Sirius and take him back to Azkaban. He wanted to kill Sirius himself to avenge his parents. Just now, with only George by his side, he wasn't confident, so he had to temporarily abandon his revenge and go find the headmaster and the other professors. Now, with not only George but also Professor Lupin, the chances of defeating Sirius are much higher. If you were to launch a sneak attack from the side, he might even be able to kill Sirius. I'm going to. Ron saw his good friend Harry go and drew his wand to chase after them. You guys, Hermione cursed as she saw the two of them chasing after them, then reluctantly drew her wand and joined in. However, she was still cautious. While chasing Harry and Ron, she asked other young wizards she met along the way to help her call Professor McGonagall and the headmaster to the Whomping Willow, saying that they had found Sirius. Meanwhile, George quickly flew to the front of the Whomping Willow, folded his wings, and landed. A quick scan with his mental energy revealed a slight smile. He's inside, just as I thought, having to evade the Ministry of Magic's pursuit, the Dementors, the teachers and students at Hogwarts, and the omnipresent portrait surveillance. Sirius Black, disguised as a rat, was in dire straits. His filthy, disheveled hair, withered arms, sunken eyes, and pale face made him appear almost dead. However, his alertness immediately alerted him to someone approaching, as the whomping willow above had reacted. He quickly used his animagus powers to transform into a large dog and stealthily approached the entrance, cautiously observing. Just a student, seeing only a young student standing outside, he slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps just curious about the whomping willow, but the next second, his expression changed. "Excuse me," George politely said to the whomping willow, and his words seemed to have a magical power, causing the usually grumpy whomping willow, which would attack anyone who approached, to move aside with its thick branches. Once a path opened up leading to the tunnel beneath the whomping willow, George walked over at a leisurely pace. He had just used a spell he learned from Lucia that allowed him to communicate with plants and forcibly control them to aid him in battle. It could be activated simply by sound. The whomping willow possessed a certain level of intelligence, but George's mental strength was far greater, making it easy to tame. It runs pretty fast. Entering the tunnel beneath the whomping willow, George didn't find Sirius Black. However, he wasn't worried, because his mental powers had already locked onto Sirius, knowing he was fleeing towards the Shrieking Shack at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel beneath the whomping willow was dug by Potter, Sirius, and others years ago. Its purpose was to allow Lupin to stay in the Shrieking Shack after transforming into a werewolf on a full moon night, thus preventing harm to others and allowing Lupin to attend school normally. The villagers had always believed that the screams and howls from the Shrieking Shacks were made by ghosts. Albus Dumbledore, to prevent others from approaching the Shrieking Shacks, encouraged the spread of these rumors. He quickly made his way through the tunnel and soon reached its end, arriving at a messy, gloomy room. The wallpaper was peeling, the floor was stained, the furniture was broken as if it had been smashed, and the windows were boarded up. Looking around, the room was empty. A door on the right was open, leading to a dark hallway where a bed and a worn-out chair stood. "Sirius, you don't need to hide anymore. I know you're under that bed." George pretended to draw his wand, though he could now cast spells without a wand. The wand was merely decorative. Hearing George's words, a black dog darted out from under the bed and lunged at George, biting at his right wrist, clearly trying to disarm him. Chapter 386 The Truth Revealed. Faint. At that moment, George pointed his left finger at the black dog, who immediately closed its eyes and fainted. Cut off curse. He then cast a second spell, specifically targeting Sirius's animagus form, restoring him to human form. A few spells in this world require specific anti-curses to dispel, but most can be dealt with using universal anti-curses. Therefore, he always valued universal anti-curses. In his view, since universal anti-curses could break most spells, if he could thoroughly study them and optimize them, it might be possible to break all spells. Combining magical knowledge from various worlds, and with Dumbledore's guidance, he could now use universal anti-curses to break spells like the Upside-Down Bell Curse, the Shadow Step Curse, and animagus transformations, which require specific anti-curses. Zombie Float. Controlling Sirius to float behind him, George carried Sirius through the secret passage back to the outside of the Whomping Willow. There, they encountered Professor Lupin and Harry's trio. "Professor Lupin, you've come at the right time. This should be Sirius Black. He's been hiding in the secret passage under the Whomping Willow. You subdued him all by yourself." Lupin looked at the unconscious Sirius Black, his expression complex, then turned to George with some surprise. Although Sirius Black was in poor condition, he wasn't someone a normal young wizard could subdue. He had heard many stories about George at school, and knew from teaching that George was highly talented in magic and a legendary young wizard at the school. But subduing Sirius Black so easily still surprised him. "He's Sirius Black. I'm going to kill him." Hearing Lupin confirm Sirius Black's identity, Harry Potter angrily approached the floating Sirius Black and pointed his wand at Sirius Black's head. George didn't stop him, knowing that even in his anger, Harry wouldn't be able to bring himself to do it. After all, Harry was still just a child. Sure enough, after the wand pressed against Sirius Black's forehead, Harry hesitated to cast a spell, and his hand trembled. Expelliarmus. Just then, Professor Lupin suddenly launched a sneak attack. True to his reputation as a top wizard, this Expelliarmus spell not only deflected Harry's wand, but also the wands of George, Hermione, and Ron. "Stop curse." Catching the three deflected wands, Lupin waved his hand and cast another spell, dispelling Sirius's stunning curse and zombie walk. Once Sirius opened his eyes, he pointed his wand at him and asked, "I've always refused to believe your betrayal. I want to know what really happened back then. Professor, what are you doing? Harry looked at Lupin in disbelief. Lupin calmly reassured him, don't get agitated. I'm just trying to prevent you from acting impulsively. Listen to me, I'll handle this. Harry, don't rush. Let's hear what they have to say. George reached out and placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Lupin's intervention surprised him. In the original story, Lupin intervened because he learned of Sirius's existence through the Marauder's map, thus realizing Sirius was innocent. However, the Marauder's map remained in Lupin's possession. He hadn't lent it to Harry, who arrived at Hogsmeade through a secret passage led by the Weasley twins. Therefore, Lupin shouldn't have intervened. It seems he underestimated the bond between Lupin and Sirius. Even after all these years, Lupin still didn't believe Sirius had betrayed them. But it didn't matter. Although there was an unexpected turn of events, it wouldn't affect his plans. It wasn't me. Back then, to deceive Voldemort, I transferred the identity of the Keeper of the Secret to Peter. When I arrived at Godric's Hollow on my flying motorcycle that day, only ruins remained. I knew Peter must have betrayed us, so I followed the clues and finally found him. But that despicable guy used the blast charm to blow up a street, cut off his little finger to fake his death, and escaped. After regaining consciousness, Sirius looked at Lupin and revealed the truth of what happened. That's impossible. Then why didn't you explain when you were arrested? You're lying. Harry simply didn't believe Sirius's words. Sirius, head bowed, looked heartbroken. If I hadn't suggested secretly switching the Secret Keeper's identity to Peter, they wouldn't have died. So staying in Azkaban was my deserved punishment. They're not wrong that I killed your parents. If you want to kill me for revenge, I won't resist, but only after I've completed one task. Then why did you escape now and infiltrate Hogwarts to kill Harry? Hermione asked a crucial question. Sirius's explanation didn't make any sense. Kill Harry? No way. I'm looking for Peter. Sirius's eyes blazed with fury. I thought he was dead in that explosion, but last year, Cornelius Fudge came to Azkaban, and I was so bored I asked for a newspaper. And in that newspaper, I saw a picture, a report about a trip to Egypt to win the Galleon Prize. Yes, it's your picture, he turned to Ron. That one-toed mouse in your hand is Peter Pettigrew. I'd recognize him even if you were ashes. If he goes back to Hogwarts with you, Harry will be in danger. I have to escape and kill him myself. With that, he pulled an old package from his pocket and handed it to Lupin. This is absurd. You're saying Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew? That's impossible. He's just a stupid mouse. Ron's face showed disbelief. He didn't believe Sirius at all. Lupin took the newspaper and saw the moving picture on it. His pupils contracted instantly. Before coming to teach at Hogwarts, he had lived a very poor life because of his werewolf identity and rarely had the money to buy newspapers, so he hadn't read this issue of the Daily Prophet. But when he saw the mouse in the GIF, he immediately recognized it as Peter Pettigrew. Since Peter Pettigrew was still alive and had been hiding, it meant that everything Sirius had said was true. He wasn't lying. Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew. He's an animagus. You should have heard Professor McGonagall mention animagus in your transfiguration class, right? Lupin reached out and pulled Sirius up, giving him a brotherly hug, a relieved smile on his face. Chapter 387 Duelist George. But Professor Lupin, that's impossible. Scabbers can't be Peter Pettigrew, he can't be an animagus. Hermione was equally skeptical, but her disbelief stemmed not from trust in Scabbers, but from her knowledge. After learning about animagus in Professor McGonagall's class, I looked it up in my homework. The Ministry of Magic keeps records of wizards who can transform into animals. There's a special register showing what animals they can become, along with markings and such. I found Professor McGonagall in the register. She can transform into a cat, and there are only 7 animagus in this century. Peter Pettigrew's name isn't on it, because we didn't register after learning about animagus. Sirius activated his animagus, transforming into a large black dog, then quickly transformed back. But that doesn't prove Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew. Ron still didn't believe it, and Harry's face was full of hesitation. Hermione took a deep breath. Professor, I've been keeping it a secret for you, but now I have to tell you. You're a werewolf, and you've been speaking up for Sirius. I find it hard to believe what you're saying is true. What? A werewolf? Ron and Harry looked shocked. Lupin was also clearly surprised. How long have you known? A long time, Hermione replied. I found out as soon as Professor Snape assigned that paper on werewolves. Professor Snape should be very happy. He assigned that paper hoping someone would figure out what my symptoms meant. Did you also check the lunar cycle and find that I always have an attack during a full moon? Or did you discover that boggarts turn into the moon when they see me? I found out everything, Hermione said softly. Lupin forced a smile. You're the smartest little witch I've ever met, Hermione. Lupin, this isn't the time to talk about this. Someone's coming. I can't be caught until I kill that rat and get revenge. Sirius sensed that several wizards were approaching and prepared to leave. At this moment, George finally spoke up. Since you're innocent, don't run away anymore. Wait for the headmaster and the others to come, and then explain everything. No, if we don't catch Peter Pettigrew, they won't believe me and will just lock me up in Azkaban. Sirius transformed into a black dog and turned to run towards the Whomping Willow. But how could George let him go? Stun. He pointed at Sirius's back, and a stunning spell was cast. Wandless spellcasting. Seeing that George could cast a spell attack so quickly without a wand, Lupin was immediately shocked. He then cast the same spell at George. Stun. He believed that Dumbledore would uphold justice, but today was the last day of the final wizarding exams, and there were still people from the Ministry of Magic at the school. If Sirius were caught now, even if Dumbledore was willing to believe him, the people from the Ministry of Magic wouldn't. So for now, the only option is to subdue George and his two companions, then take them away. After the Ministry of Magic personnel leave tomorrow, they can find Sirius to explain the situation to Dumbledore and discuss the next steps. However, before his stunning spell could even reach George, George deflected it with a wave of his hand. I'm sorry, Professor Lupin, I can't believe what you're saying right now. So, I'll have to trouble you for now. Disarm. Deflecting Lupin's stunning spell, George cast a disarming spell twice as fast as Lupin, knocking his wand away. Followed by two more spells. Hanging upside down. Immediately bind. Lupin was now suspended upside down in the air, his hands bound by ropes, unable to cast spells. Wandless spellcasting isn't simply about doing nothing, it still requires certain hand gestures. It's much simpler than complex hand gestures, and its speed is comparable to wanded spellcasting, though its power is significantly less. A master like Lupin could naturally cast spells without a wand, but with his hands bound and suspended upside down, he was helpless. George was different. He had long since integrated the spellcasting methods of the Harry Potter and fairy tale worlds, so even casting spells without a wand wouldn't diminish his magical power. Moreover, because of his current strength, even using only the magic of this world, his casting speed and power far surpassed that of a master like Lupin. Not to mention Lupin and Sirius, even Dumbledore wouldn't be his match. In terms of his understanding of the magic of this world, he was inferior to Dumbledore. In terms of the speed and power of his spellcasting, Dumbledore was far behind. If you were to add the magic of other worlds, it would be even more overwhelming. If he could transform into a dragon or something, the entire world combined wouldn't be his match. However, he had no intention of forcibly conquering this world by force. There was no need. He needed to slowly improve his magical skills in this peaceful and friendly environment. Why become a villain hated by everyone when he could become a legendary wizard? He still had mentors and friends in this world. He wasn't without ties. Your magical skill has reached such a level. No wonder the headmaster agreed to let you graduate early. Lupin looked at his bound hands, his tone filled with admiration. He knew George was capable, otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the final wizarding exams in his second year, preparing to graduate early. But he hadn't expected him to be this powerful. Subduing Sirius had already raised his opinion of George several notches, but experiencing it firsthand revealed just how terrifying George's dueling skills were. He was completely powerless, as if facing Dumbledore himself. But we're not lying to you. Now is not the time. Have Black hide first. We'll go see Dumbledore together after the Ministry of Magic leaves. George, don't listen to him. The headmaster and the others are already here. Hermione and the others hadn't expected George to be so formidable, defeating Sirius and Professor Lupin instantly without a wand. But now wasn't the time for surprise, as they could already see Dumbledore and the other professors and Ministry of Magic examiners in the distance. Don't worry, as long as you're not lying, nothing will happen today. George smiled and replied to Lupin, then casually deactivated Sirius's animagus transformation again. He certainly wouldn't let Sirius be captured and sent back to Azkaban, but first he had to claim credit for capturing the escaped Sirius. Chapter 388 The Little Pettigrew Who Can't Escape. It really is Sirius Black. Go and inform the minister, the examiner from the Ministry of Magic. Seeing the black dog transformed into Sirius, ordered his men to use the Hogwarts fireplace to notify the minister as quickly as possible, even before approaching. Dumbledore, meanwhile, approached George and asked, "What's going on here? Why was Remus captured too?" He wasn't surprised that George could subdue Sirius. He knew George's true strength. However, he didn't understand why George would attack Lupin. HMPH, what's there to say? Remus must have conspired with Sirius, that's why George attacked him. No wonder Sirius was able to break into the school twice, it seems Remus let him in. Snape was overjoyed to see Lupin suspended in mid-air by his prized student George using the magic he created, the upside-down bell, while Sirius was knocked unconscious. He felt a surge of pride, remembering how these people had tricked him years ago, and now they were easily defeated by his disciple. It was a way of venting his anger. Moreover, he already harbored resentment towards Dumbledore for allowing Lupin, a dangerous werewolf, to teach at the school, and had always suspected that Lupin was helping Sirius Black get into the school. Dumbledore simply didn't believe him. So, seeing the current scene, he immediately knew he was right. "You've misunderstood, Severus. Sirius didn't come to the school to kill Harry. Although Lupin couldn't move his body, he could still speak." However, he was interrupted by George halfway through his sentence. "Let me explain. Here's what happened." George, using the most concise language, explained the whole story from his perspective. "These are just lies to deceive you children." Snape, due to his prejudice against Lupin and Sirius, clearly didn't want to believe them. The Ministry of Magic examiners echoed, "He's just trying to deflect blame. Please hand Sirius over to the Ministry. And Professor Lupin, he's guilty of aiding Sirius's escape. Please allow us to take him back for questioning." "Wait," Dumbledore said, "if they were just trying to deceive us, why did they explain so much after confiscating his wand in the first place? Why didn't they just take action? If Sirius's goal was to kill Harry, that would have been the best time to act. They don't know George can cast spells without a wand." The wise Dumbledore immediately grasped the key point and stopped the Ministry examiners from making the arrests. Everyone fell into deep thought. What he said made sense. Actually, there's no need to overthink it. It's simple. Just find Scabbers and verify if it's really Sirius. Then it'll be clear whether he's lying. George looked at Ron. "Where's your Scabbers?" "It bit me after you flew away and then disappeared," Ron replied, scratching his head. George nodded, unsurprised. "It's all right, let me find him." With a wave of his hand, 4 pieces of paper of different colors appeared in the air, forming a magic circle. The fourfold array of reason. Is this the tracking magic George invented? He's a genius. The professors, seeing the new magic George displayed that they couldn't understand, began praising him. They had already been astonished several times by hearing that George had subdued Sirius and defeated Lupin without a wand. Found him. He's already out of the school and is moving rapidly westward. After locating Peter Pettigrew using the fourfold array of reason, George said to Dumbledore, "If Scabbers really is Peter Pettigrew, then once he escapes the school's anti-apparition range, he can apparit and escape, making it difficult to find him again. I can still fly there in time. Thank you for your help." "Be careful," Dumbledore nodded. Even if it really was Peter Pettigrew, he wouldn't be a match for George, so he wasn't worried about George's safety. With Dumbledore's permission, George flapped his wings and, with a sonic boom, chased after Pettigrew in the direction he had fled. Pettigrew, within the range of Hogwarts' anti-apparition spell, couldn't apparit, and lacking a broomstick and flight magic, he could only flee at the speed of a mouse. However, as a mouse, he was highly stealthy. Once he escaped outside the castle, it would be difficult for anyone to find him again. "It's okay, they won't find me, they won't catch me." "Damn it, why did you run away?" "I was forced into it. I didn't want to kill James, I just didn't want to die." He desperately ran away from the castle, constantly complaining in his mind. Years ago, he was captured by the Dark Lord, whose power terrified him. He didn't want to die, so he became the Dark Lord's spy, later accidentally becoming the secret keeper, causing the death of his best friend James. To avoid being hunted down, he framed Sirius, faked his death to escape, but fearing retaliation from the Dark Lord's followers, he had been living as a mouse in the sewers ever since. Because he didn't want to sever ties with the wizarding world and wanted to stay informed about the Dark Lords and the wizarding world's activities to adapt accordingly, he sought out the Weasley family and lived as their pet for 12 years. Originally, continuing like this, living safely as a pet, wouldn't have been bad, but unexpectedly, Sirius Black escaped. "Hey, Scabbers, where are you going?" Just as he had escaped to the edge of the Black Lake, near Hogsmeade Station, and was about a kilometer or two away from using apparition, a familiar voice suddenly rang in his ears. "It's him. How did he catch up with me? And find me so quickly? Shouldn't he be chasing Sirius?" George's new magic could track Sirius, so it could track him too. That's why he immediately decided to leave Hogwarts after seeing George use his new magic to locate Sirius. If Sirius were captured, he would reveal what happened back then. Although he thought no one would believe Sirius's story, if someone did, and if George used his tracking magic to find him, he was doomed. He thought it wouldn't be easy for George to capture Sirius, and that he might even be killed instead, giving him plenty of time to escape. He hadn't expected George to be so fast. "Trying to bite me? Can you even bite me?" George grabbed Scabbers by the tail and lifted him up. Scabbers opened its mouth and lunged at George, who didn't defend himself, letting it bite. Animagus mice are stronger than normal mice, but only to a limited extent. With his current physical abilities, even if Scabbers bit off its teeth, it wouldn't be able to break his skin. Chapter 389 Irrefutable Evidence. Revert to human form. Seeing that he couldn't escape and looking around to see that only George was chasing after him, Peter Pettigrew, driven by malice, immediately deactivated his animagus form and reverted to human form. If he could kill George before Dumbledore and the others arrived, he would still have a chance to escape. Avada Kedavra, he drew his wand and aimed it at George, unhesitatingly casting the Killing Curse, a sure kill spell. A beam of green light shot upwards, aiming for George's chin. He thought that even Dumbledore wouldn't have time to dodge such a close-range Killing Curse. However, in reality, George easily dodged the curse by looking up, and the curse even swung Peter Pettigrew around by 1 foot before slamming him to the ground, making him see stars and nearly faint. "You dare use the Killing Curse on me? You've got a death wish." George stomped on Pettigrew's wand, breaking it, and sent him flying. The force was so great that it broke several of Pettigrew's ribs. Actually, with his current Dragon Slayer physique, even if Pettigrew's Killing Curse hit, he might not be able to kill him, but some risks were better left unchecked. He then proceeded to deliver another beating, until Pettigrew was kneeling on the ground, trembling and begging for mercy, before he finally stopped. "Let me tell you, behave yourself in a bit, or I can't guarantee you'll be sent to Azkaban alive." "I'll behave, I'll absolutely behave." Pettigrew felt that George was even more terrifying than Voldemort had been. Sensing the difference, George picked up Pettigrew, spread his wings, and flew back towards the castle. Soon, he returned to the lawn where the Whomping Willow was. There, besides Dumbledore and the other professors, the Minister of Magic, Fudge, and a group of Aurors had also arrived, including Tonks. "It really is Peter Pettigrew." Everyone recognized the wizard George was carrying immediately. He was Peter Pettigrew, the recipient of the Order of Merlin, First Class, and posthumously honored as a hero wizard. This meant that Sirius Black's words were very likely true. Why is he so bruised and battered? However, they then realized that while it was indeed Peter Pettigrew, his face was noticeably fatter than in the photos, and not just naturally fat, but from being beaten. He was limping, clutching his stomach, and had just coughed up blood. "When I found him, he attacked me with an unforgivable curse, and I hit him a little too hard." George waved his hand, casting a healing spell without his staff to treat Pettigrew's external injuries. "You damned thing, you traitor, I'll kill you." Sirius Black, who had already woken up and was bound, saw Pettigrew and immediately flew into a rage, rising to attack, but was quickly held down by the Aurors. Pettigrew, terrified, sat down on the ground. "I think there must be some misunderstanding, Peter Pettigrew." Sirius said. "You sided with the Void and framed him. Is he lying?" Minister of Magic Fudge stepped forward and asked Pettigrew. As Minister of Magic, he desperately didn't want Sirius to be telling the truth, because it would mean the Ministry of Magic had made a mistake, imprisoning the real hero in Azkaban for 12 years and making the despicable Pettigrew the hero. The Ministry of Magic would become the biggest joke in the wizarding world, and he, as Minister of Magic, would be the biggest joke within the joke. Yes, he's lying. He's the traitor. It must have been that person whose name can't even be mentioned who taught him some tricks so he could escape Azkaban. "I'm innocent." Hearing the Minister of Magic's tone, Pettigrew felt there was still a chance and quickly pointed at Sirius. Sirius's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets with anger. "Voldemort? Taught me a few tricks? I'm a traitor? How dare you? When have I ever flown over anyone stronger or more powerful than me? And you, I truly regret not seeing you as a traitor from the beginning. You've always liked powerful friends, hoping to gain their favor, haven't you? Before, it was us, me and Remus, and James. I'm not a traitor, you are. Pettigrew fearfully retreated towards Fudge, but his mouth remained tight, refusing to admit it. If you're not a traitor, then why did you hide as a rat for 12 years instead of becoming a hero openly? Seeing the stalemate, George immediately asked a crucial question. Pettigrew's eyes darted around. That's because I was afraid. I was afraid Voldemort's men were looking for me. I sent their most capable henchman to Azkaban, a wizard who dared to fight Voldemort, dared to fight Sirius Black, and was awarded the Order of Merlin First Class for his courage, would be afraid of Voldemort's men after his downfall, and hide for 12 years. George couldn't help but laugh. Then why did you run away? Why did you attack me with a killing curse when I found you? I was scared that Sirius would retaliate against me, so I ran away. And when you appeared, I thought you were in cahoots with Sirius. Pettigrew was already stuttering, because he didn't know how to make up his lies anymore. The professors and people from the Ministry of Magic were also looking at Pettigrew with strange eyes. They weren't stupid. Pettigrew's explanation was too far-fetched. In comparison, Sirius's explanation was much more reasonable. Severus, I remember you should still have some potion to make truth potion, right? Dumbledore smiled at Snape, who nodded expressionlessly, enough to make 2 doses, one for each of them. I believe they'll know who's telling the truth and who's lying after they drink it. Although Snape hated Sirius, he wasn't stupid. He knew immediately that Pettigrew was lying, and naturally, he wouldn't help the person who killed Lily. To be honest, if he hadn't been trying so hard to restrain himself, his desire to kill Pettigrew was no less than Sirius's. If Pettigrew hadn't revealed Lily's residence, Lily wouldn't have been found and killed by Voldemort. Animagus, upon hearing the truth serum, Pettigrew's pupils constricted, and he immediately transformed into a mouse, ready to flee. He knew that once he drank the truth serum, everything would be exposed. However, George, who was already prepared, saw Pettigrew trying to escape and flashed to his side, stomping him under his foot. Now it seems that Sirius and Professor Lupin were telling the truth. This guy was lying. The Minister of Magic, seeing this, could only nod helplessly. The evidence was irrefutable, and he couldn't say anything more. Chapter 390 Order of Merlin, Second Class. Take this traitor who has deceived everyone for so many years away and lock him up in Azkaban with the Death Eaters until he dies. Fudge, as expected of someone who had served as Minister of Magic for so many years, immediately changed his expression after confirming that Peter Pettigrew was the traitor. He waved for the Aurors to take Pettigrew away. Since there was no way to change the outcome, he could only minimize the losses to the Ministry of Magic and to him as minister. After a passionate speech, he turned his attention to George. Your name is George, right? I've heard of you. You helped Deputy Director Amy capture a dark wizard in France and even received a medal for bravery. You're a truly excellent wizard. George is the most outstanding child I've ever seen. Although he's only in his 2nd year, he's already participated in Newts this year and applied for early graduation. Dumbledore, who had been silent until now, saw through Fudge's thoughts at a glance. He winked at George and spoke. George, understanding perfectly, began to act accordingly. I've always longed to join the Ministry of Magic, and I've heard that Minister Fudge is the most outstanding minister in its history. It would be wonderful if I could join the ministry after graduation. Unfortunately, I'm too young and probably don't meet the ministry's hiring standards. Fudge isn't such a rigid wizard. I had high hopes for him back then, and I believe he won't let age be a criterion and miss out on such an excellent graduate, Dumbledore added at the opportune moment. Fudge's face lit up with a wide smile. The most outstanding minister is too kind to me. I also thank Headmaster Dumbledore for his recognition. If someone as talented as George were willing to join our ministry after graduation, I would be very happy to welcome him. Moreover, given that George has uncovered the truth of what happened back then and captured Peter Pettigrew, I will propose awarding George the Order of Merlin, Second Class, as a commendation. As for the 10,000 galleons reward, you can collect it from the ministry in a few days after we notify you. His initial idea was to persuade George to add some credit to the Ministry of Magic. After all, almost all the credit for this incident went to the young wizard George. If George hadn't used his newly invented tracking charm to find Sirius Black and little Pettigrew, the truth of what happened back then would never have come to light. The Ministry of Magic, on the other hand, only showed up last and didn't do anything helpful. Reporting the facts as they were would be incredibly embarrassing for Magic, having already made such a huge blunder 12 years ago and now failing to achieve anything. However, if George were to share some credit with the Ministry of Magic in later interviews, emphasizing their role, the Ministry would look better. That's why he had looked at George earlier. But now it seemed unnecessary. George was graduating early and even wanted to join the Ministry of Magic. Perfect. If he was quick enough to recruit George before the interviews, all of George's achievements would represent the Ministry, since George would be a member of the Ministry. This way, neither the Ministry of Magic nor he, the Minister, would lose face over this incident. In fact, they might even gain some praise. That should be about right. George looked at Fudge, whose face was beaming like a chrysanthemum, and knew he had it in the bag. He had the results of the ultimate wizarding exam, Dumbledore's recommendation letter, Fudge's approval, and had spent a fortune having Deputy Director Amy pull strings for him. He was confident he was in the Ministry of Magic. Now it was just a matter of which department he'd be assigned to and what position he'd get. Actually, his dream was to join the most mysterious department, the Department of Mysteries. As far as he knew, this department existed before the Ministry of Magic was even established. In fact, the Ministry was built around mysteries. Most of its secrets were highly classified, known only to a handful of wizards within the Ministry. He understood that the Department of Mysteries primarily researched 6 areas. The first was love, a magical and powerful force involving a very ancient form of magic. Harry's mother had used this power to protect him, causing Voldemort's killing curse to rebound and kill her, remaining within Harry to protect him from Voldemort. To be honest, George didn't understand this kind of energy very well. The school library didn't have any books on it, and even Dumbledore only had a vague understanding. The second type was time, which seemed to be the origin of spells like the reversal of hours and the time turner, and was the magic he was currently researching. The third type was space, mainly studying planets outside Earth and creating corresponding magic through the connections between different planets and celestial bodies. The fourth type was prophecy, as some wizards were born with the ability to foresee the future, and the wizards wanted to develop this into a universal magic that everyone could use. The Great Battle of the Department of Mysteries in the original book took place in the Hall of Prophecy. The fifth type was mind, as the wizards believed that the human brain contained too many secrets and energies, and if it could be thoroughly studied, many kinds of magic would be born. The last type was death. Where does the soul go after death? Does death exist? And what secrets are contained in the ghosts that wizards become after death? He was very interested in the research of the Department of Mysteries, and if he could study with the top wizards there, he would definitely gain a lot. Unfortunately, all wizards who enter the Department of Mysteries are carefully selected and pass various tests. They wouldn't hire a newcomer to the Ministry of Magic, even if that person is very strong. So, at least for now, he can't enter the Department of Mysteries. But that's okay, he can adapt first. There are many things in the Ministry of Magic that can help him, and it's not too late to join the Department of Mysteries later. One step at a time, steady and methodical, no rush. Pettigrew was captured, Sirius Black was exonerated, and George achieved his goal, retiring successfully. Next, he just needs to wait for the results of the final wizarding exams, then graduate with his 7th-year wizards and begin his career in the Ministry of Magic. Speaking of which, he's actually a little reluctant to leave Hogwarts. After all, he's been there for 2 years, witnessing his growth from a weak wizard to the powerful one he is now. Tonight, I'll destroy that Horcrux Voldemort hid in the Room of Requirement. Chapter 391 The Crown of Wisdom. Voldemort currently possesses 6 Horcruxes. The 7th, Nagini's snake, should not have been created yet, according to the normal plot development. The first, the diary, was destroyed after George drained it. The second, Ravenclaw's tiara, is hidden in the Room of Requirement on the 8th floor. The third, Marvolo Gaunt's ring, is in the Gaunt family's old house. The fourth, Salazar Slytherin's pendant, is in the Black family mansion at 12 Grimwald Place. The fifth, Helga Hufflepuff's chalice, is in the Gringotts Lestrange family vault. The sixth, and final, Horcrux is Harry Potter himself. When Voldemort used the killing curse on Harry Potter, a fragment of his soul entered Harry's body, transforming him into a Horcrux. George knows the locations of all 6 Horcruxes, and with his current power, he can easily destroy them. He can even extract a fragment of Voldemort's soul from Harry Potter using the soul extraction magic he learned from the apprentice wizarding world. However, He didn't intend to destroy all of Voldemort's Horcruxes in such a hurry. First, Voldemort posed no threat to him now. Even if Voldemort were to resurrect, he would be no different from any other wizard in his eyes, easily dealt with. Second, he didn't think Voldemort's existence was necessarily a bad thing. Voldemort's occasional appearances allowed him to boost his reputation and advance his rank in the Ministry of Magic, eventually becoming minister. If he destroyed all the Horcruxes at once, Voldemort would be terrified and probably wouldn't dare show his face for a while. But if he destroyed a diadem, Voldemort would likely be angry, nervous, and trying to expedite his resurrection plan. With Pettigrew already in Azkaban, no one would go to Albania to help Voldemort resurrect. Provoking Voldemort might make him leave the forest and cause some trouble. In short, this was just a convenient thing for him. He acted on his idea immediately. That night, George stealthily arrived on the 8th floor. The 8th floor was vast, containing the headmaster's office, the Ravenclaw dean's office, the divination professor's office, the entrance to the divination classroom, the fat lady's corridor, the entrance to the Gryffindor Tower, the Ravenclaw Tower, and the entrance to the Room of Requirement. The Room of Requirement's entrance was clearly marked by a tapestry. This tapestry was famous on the 8th floor, called Troll Beating Barnabas. It depicted a wizard being chased by a troll with a club because the wizard, Barnabas, had tried to teach the troll ballet. He quickly found the tapestry and went to the wall opposite it. I need that hiding place. Thinking of the Room of Requirement's cluttered room, he passed that wall 3 times until a perfectly smooth door appeared before him. Pushing it open, he entered a room the size of a cathedral. The surrounding scenery resembled a city, with towering walls made up of the belongings hidden by thousands of long-deceased students. Advanced Transfiguration Charm, Seamless Stretch Charm, Legilimency Charm, Awakening Charm, Anti-Tracking Charm. Stepping into the Room of Requirement, George didn't immediately search for the crown, but instead began observing the room. If there was one room in the entire Hogwarts castle that was the most interesting, it would undoubtedly be the Room of Requirement. Aside from water and food, it could grant you anything you wanted that didn't possess magical properties. And it couldn't be tracked by the Marauder's map. The wizard who created this room was truly a master alchemist. After observing for a while, George couldn't help but exclaim. This Room of Requirement was definitely a top-tier alchemical artifact, containing dozens of spells, most of which were extremely difficult. To be honest, with his current alchemical skills, he could only understand them. Replicating the same function of the Room of Requirement was still a long way off. However, the Room of Requirement had given him a lot of inspiration. Although he couldn't replicate it now, he could utilize the principles involved to study it gradually and combine it with the training rooms of the Marvel Universe's school to achieve similar, or even better, results. The school's simulation training room was a room created by the mutant beast using technology to simulate combat scenarios and enemies, helping the X-Men improve their combat experience. He had previously modified it with magic, but only by simply applying a seamless stretch charm to expand its area. Now, inspired by the Room of Requirement, he could combine the advantages of both to create an enhanced version of the Room of Requirement simulation training room. Walking along the path amidst piles of various junk, George released his mental energy and quickly located the Ravenclaw crown. It was being worn on the head of a wizard bust wearing a wig. Reaching out to remove the crown, feeling the curse and soul invasion emanating from it, a cold smile appeared on George's face, and then he grabbed at the crown. Soul separation, a powerful suction force emanated from George's palm, and Voldemort's soul, filled with black power and curses, screamed as it was forcibly pulled from Ravenclaw's crown. "What are you?" Before Voldemort's soul could ask, George opened his mouth, and 3 colored flames erupted, instantly incinerating it. He didn't destroy Ravenclaw's crown directly, because he felt it was a top-tier magical artifact, and destroying it would be a waste. Ravenclaw's crown was created by Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. Rowena Ravenclaw possessed supreme wisdom and creativity, and was considered one of the greatest wizards of her time. She believed that the students we teach must be intellectually superior. Therefore, Ravenclaw House, which she represented, only admitted bright and intelligent students. The Ravenclaw crown, the most advanced magical artifact she created, also had the magical power to inspire wisdom. By wearing the crown, even a fool can become a normal person can become a genius, and a genius can become a super genius. With a Ravenclaw crown, George can learn magic and alchemy much faster. and if he can research the intelligence-enhancing magic bestowed upon the Ravenclaw crown, then his true form and his clones can use this magic to temporarily increase the intelligence of others, or create magical items that enhance intelligence. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Voldemort and Agony. But wearing it like this on my head doesn't seem quite right. George frowned as he placed the crown on his head and looked in the mirror. The Ravenclaw crown was a glittering crown studded with many jewels, its base inscribed with Ravenclaw's famous motto, "Superior wisdom is the greatest treasure of mankind." The crown was very feminine. It looked like a princess on a girl's head, but on a boy's, it looked awkward. Did Ravenclaw consider whether any of her successors would be boys? After a moment's thought, he quickly came up with an idea. Flavis, he conjured a hat commonly worn by male wizards in this era with his left hand, activated its intelligence with an awakening charm, and then placed a crown inside the hat, allowing it to extend and cover the head. A crown disguised as a hat appeared. Putting the hat on his head and looking at himself in the mirror again, a satisfied smile appeared on George's face. This feels quite comfortable. The magic of the Ravenclaw crown took effect the moment the hat was placed on his head. He felt a surge of pure energy flow directly into his brain from the top of his head. Under its influence, his mind instantly became much clearer, and his thinking was noticeably faster than before. To give an analogy, before wearing the crown, he was like someone in the mental state of 3 or 4 p.m. when going to work or school, drowsy and with extremely low efficiency in studying and working. But after wearing the crown, it was like waking up after a full 8 hours of dreamless sleep, brushing his teeth, washing his face, and stepping out the door feeling refreshed and invigorated. After obtaining the crown, he studied it in the room of requirement for several more hours before returning to his room. At the same time, a giant python in the Albanian forest suddenly fell from a tree, letting out an angry hiss. Why is another Horcrux missing? It was none other than Voldemort, the Dark Lord, whose name no one in the wizarding world dared to mention, referred to as the Mysterious Man. Years ago, after casting the killing curse on Harry Potter, the prophesied son, the curse rebounded, his body perished, and his soul fled to the familiar Albanian forest, where he eked out a living by possessing the bodies of vulnerable animals. In his condition at the time, he couldn't possess magical creatures, only ordinary animals, and his power in those bodies was extremely limited. Furthermore, the wizarding world still had Dumbledore, whom even at his peak he wasn't confident of defeating. Most of his loyal followers were in Azkaban, and none of the remaining Death Eaters sought him out. Therefore, he never dared to cause trouble. Until 3 years ago, he encountered Quirinus Quirrell, who was on vacation in the forest, and made him his loyal servant, allowing him to return to Hogwarts by residing in the back of Quirrell's head. Unfortunately, the plan to resurrect him using the Philosopher's Stone failed due to Harry's presence. Quirrell died, and he was forced to flee back to the Albanian forest in disgrace. The following year, he discovered that his Horcrux diary, which he had kept at the Malfoy family's house, had been inexplicably destroyed. He suspected that Malfoy, the traitor, had given the diary to Dumbledore, who then destroyed his Horcruxes. Although he was furious at the time, there was nothing he could do. He also believed that even if the diary was destroyed, he still had 4 Horcruxes, which he had hidden very well, with many magical traps around them, so there shouldn't be any problems. But this year, another Horcrux was destroyed, leaving him with only 3. The key concern was that he worried Dumbledore might have discovered clues about his Horcrux making and was personally searching for and destroying them one by one. If that were the case, the trouble would be even greater. If the remaining 3 Horcruxes were all destroyed, his soul would no longer be safe. He believed Dumbledore would personally lead Aurors and some powerful warriors to find and kill his soul's original form. Therefore, he was anxious and furious. I can't just sit and wait like this, I have to take the initiative. I've managed to subdue a blood-cursed beastman, so I'm not entirely defenseless. This year, he found a very suitable entity to possess in the forest, a blood-cursed beastman. Blood-cursed orcs are not magical creatures, but rather transformed from wizards afflicted by the blood curse. The blood curse is a maternally inherited curse, passed down to all future female offspring, allowing them to freely transform between humans and snakes. However, upon reaching a certain age, They are forcibly and permanently transformed into giant snakes, losing all memories and becoming completely cold-blooded. These giant snakes are no ordinary snakes. Although not magical creatures, they possess wizarding blood, possessing considerable destructive power and even the ability to cast spells. Voldemort, as Parseltongue, could also use Nagia's magic to cast spells after possessing her, making him much stronger than when possessing an ordinary giant snake, but still no match for his own original form. He had originally intended to wait a few more years until Dumbledore died, so that his resurrection would be much less difficult and dangerous. Unfortunately, time was running out. He feared that if he waited any longer, all the Horcruxes would be destroyed. After a final night of contemplation, he finally decided to take the initiative, first possessing Nagini's body to leave the Albanian forest and head to Azkaban. Why Azkaban? Because he needed help to resurrect himself. But he no longer trusted Death Eaters like Malfoy, who had once been loyal to him but were now trying to distance themselves. He trusted those Death Eaters captured and tortured in Azkaban, some preferring capture to admit they were controlled by his imperious curse. He had a plan for rescuing these Death Eaters, though risky, it was the only way. His method was simple and one he excelled at, seducing and persuading the leader of the Dementors guarding Azkaban. By making the Dementors his allies, the imprisoned Death Eaters could escape Azkaban. Once he had loyal followers, his resurrection plan could officially begin. 3 days later, the results of the ultimate wizarding exams were released. George topped the list with 12 excellent scores. Ron's brother, Percy, came in second. On the same day the results were announced, George, Percy, and many other high-achieving seventh-year wizards submitted their applications for positions at the Ministry of Magic. Joining the Ministry of Magic was the best career path for most seventh-year wizards after graduation, but only a handful were hired each year, and sometimes none at all. The next day, for some reason, the Ministry of Magic responded with a processing time 2 weeks faster than usual. Chapter 393 A Bright Future. Dear Mr. George, your application has been approved. Your position is Assistant in the Office of Prohibition of Abuse of Magic, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Please report to the Ministry of Magic's second basement level in 2 weeks. George's lips curled into a slight smile as he read the Ministry's reply. Assistant in the Office of Prohibition of Abuse of Magic. This was the position he had painstakingly secured after Amy spent a fortune. Don't underestimate this assistant position, it's one of the most coveted positions among wizards in the Ministry of Magic. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is the largest department in the Ministry of Magic, and barring unforeseen circumstances, its director is almost always the next Minister for Magic. The previous director was Barty Crouch, who was originally slated to become Minister for Magic. However, due to his son's involvement as a Death Eater, he was implicated and reassigned to the Department of International Magical Cooperation, allowing Cornelius Fudge to land the job. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement comprises 3 main divisions, the Wizengamer Administration, the Auror Command, and the Office of Prohibition of Abuse of Magic. The Wizengamer governing body, comprised of approximately 50 members, is headed by the Chief Wizard of Wizengamer, a position typically held by Dumbledore in recent years. Members of Wizengamer wear crimson robes with a delicate silver W embroidered on their left breast, and are authorized to award the Order of Merlin. Most members are high-ranking officials in the Ministry of Magic, including the Minister and Deputy Minister. The Auror Command, needless to say, is the Ministry of Magic's most powerful law enforcement agency. The Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic, on par with these two, naturally possesses immense power. Its main tasks include prohibiting wizards from casting spells in the presence of muggles or underage wizards, reversing accidental magical incidents, and investigating incidents of wizards casting spells in the presence of muggles and incidents caused by underage wizards. It also prohibits the misuse of magic and reverses spells that have already had consequences, such as altering muggle memories. Ron's father, Arthur Weasley, worked at the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Muggle Objects, a subordinate agency of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic. Normally, the Minister of Magic is succeeded by the Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, who is chosen from either the head of the Auror Command or the Director of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic. Becoming an assistant to the Director of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic is the only way to advance to the Director of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic, and thus to the Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and ultimately, the Minister of Magic. Besides this, there's another reason. He learned from Amy that the current director of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic is named Dolores Umbridge. Yes, that pink toad. Why choose such a wizard as his superior? It's simple, killing such a superior and seizing power would be guilt-free. The best way to rise to power quickly is naturally to make the person above him disappear. Becoming the director of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic is equivalent to becoming one of the higher-ups in the Ministry of Magic, making many things easier. Of course, some maneuvering is involved, but it's nothing to him. How is it going? In the library, Hermione, Harry, Ron, Ginny, and Luna all looked at George expectantly. George smiled and handed over the letter, approved. Assistant in the Office of Abusive Magic, starting in 2 weeks. The Office of Abusive Magic? Then you and my dad will be colleagues. The children huddled around the letter, Ron and Ginny exclaiming almost simultaneously. Harry adjusted his glasses. I can't believe it. You started school a year later than us, and now you're graduating and going to work for the Ministry of Magic. Although I can't apply for early graduation, I'll work twice as hard for the next few years and try to join the Ministry of Magic after graduation. Hermione clenched her fist, looking at George, as if making a vow. George gave her a thumbs up. It would be 4 years before Hermione and the others graduated. Who knew if he'd still be in the Ministry of Magic then? Study hard, you have your final exams tomorrow. Putting away the Ministry of Magic's reply, George reminded Harry, Ron, and the others before leaving the library. Hearing this, Harry and Ron immediately slumped onto the table like wilted eggplants. They were dreading their final exams. I'm suddenly so envious of George. He won't have to take exams anymore, and he can earn his own money, Ron couldn't help but say, watching George's retreating figure. He's always earned his own money, Ginny couldn't help but tease her brother. Ron scratched his head. Yeah, I forgot he's an orphan and has a shop in Nocturne Alley. Work has its hardships, school has its hardships. The adult world is only harder than ours now. Luna, who hadn't spoken until now, suddenly blurted out, making everyone blink. When we were kids, we always wanted to grow up, and when we grew up, we wanted to go back to being kids. George, who had already reached the library entrance, murmured to himself. In the small space of the library, Harry and the others' words naturally didn't escape his ears. With a reply from the Ministry of Magic, he first went to see Dumbledore and Snape, and then went to see his Slytherin classmates and seniors. As a Slytherin himself, he got along very well with his Slytherin classmates. Or more precisely, the Slytherin students idolized him, idolizing his power and the glory he had brought to Slytherin. Even Malfoy, who initially clashed with him, was now completely subservient to him. Even the 7th-year students, upon learning that he had achieved 12 excellent grades in his final wizarding exams and successfully landed a position as an assistant in the Office of Misuse of Magic at the Ministry of Magic, became much more humble. Harry and his friends didn't understand the prestige of being an assistant in the Office of Misuse of Magic, assuming it was similar to Percy's assistant position in the Department of International Magical Cooperation, but these Slytherin students knew perfectly well. They believed that with George's talent, he could likely become a director after 7 or 8 years as an assistant, a director after 15 or 16 years, and perhaps a minister after 20 years. And George was only 12 years old. His future was truly limitless. In the following days, the 1st through 6th year students were taking their final exams, but as a graduate like the 7th year students, he didn't need to take any more exams, and he spent most of his time researching the Room of Requirement. After the exams, he attended the final school dinner, and after saying goodbye to Snape, he boarded the train back to London with the other young wizards. Chapter 394 The Deathly Hallows. Stepping out of the train station, just like last year, many parents of young wizards were already waiting. Hermione's parents, the Grangers, Ron's parents, the Weasleys, and Harry's aunt and uncle, whom he utterly disliked. Although Sirius's name had been cleared, Fudge, for the sake of the Ministry of Magic's reputation, after consulting with Dumbledore and Sirius, decided not to immediately reveal the truth. Instead, they decided to hold a press conference for the wizarding world on a specific day to solemnly announce the truth and, incidentally, award George, the greatest contributor. In fact, Fudge's purpose was simple, to reveal the truth after George joined the Ministry of Magic. This would benefit the Ministry of Magic, George, and Sirius, so no one objected. Currently, apart from the Ministry of Magic officials and professors present at the time, as well as George and Harry, the rest of the wizarding world still considered Sirius a fugitive. Therefore, Before the Ministry of Magic's press conference, Sirius would hide at Hogwarts, and Harry would have to stay at his aunt and uncle's house. Once the press conference ended, Harry could finally live with his godfather, Sirius Black, at 12 Grimmauld Place. Watching Hermione and the others being taken away, George apparated and vanished from the spot. Although he wasn't yet an adult, he had already removed the traces the Ministry of Magic had placed on him, allowing him to cast spells freely without fear of being discovered. The Black family mansion should be here. Instead of teleporting back to his shop in Nocturne Alley, he went to 12 Grimmauld Place first. His purpose here was simple, to retrieve Voldemort's Horcrux locket. He didn't intend to destroy all the Horcruxes now, but that didn't mean he would leave them unattended. If Voldemort moved their locations, finding them would be troublesome. Since he knew their locations, he would collect the remaining Horcruxes first, and destroy them all when Voldemort was no longer of any use to him. He stealthily approached the Dark Gate, releasing his mental energy to scan the entire Black Mansion. He quickly located the locket containing Voldemort's soul power. Looks like it's here. Apparating to the glass cabinet in the second-floor living room, George glanced inside. A rusty dagger, animal claws, coiled snakeskin, a decorative crystal bottle inlaid with an opal containing blood, a silver nosebox that bites and contains flesh powder, a multi-legged, tweezer-like instrument, a music box that crawls like a spider and has hypnotic properties, and a keepsake box that no one could open. Reaching out, he took the keepsake box, conjured an identical replica with a transfiguration charm, and then vanished. This keepsake box was Slytherin's locket, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Years ago, Voldemort hid this Horcrux in a remote cave on an island far from his childhood orphanage, protecting it with various magical traps. He even planned to sacrifice Regulus's house elf. This would allow Regulus, the Death Eater who had previously idolized Voldemort and was Sirius Black's brother, to see his true colors. Regulus then sacrificed his life, exchanging a fake for the Horcrux, which he then entrusted to the house elf Ketkree to destroy. However, Ketkree tried countless methods but could not destroy the locket, and could only place it in a glass case on the second floor. Seal, using a sealing spell. He sealed the evil power emanating from the locket, threw it into the transmogrification space, and George arrived in Little Hangleton. When Voldemort was 16, he came to Gaunt's old house, knocked out his uncle Morphin Gaunt, and used Morphin's wand to kill old Tom Riddle and his wife, framing Morphin for the murders. He then stole the ancestral heirloom passed down from Arvalo Gaunt to Morphin, the ring inlaid with a resurrection stone, and crafted it into a Horcrux. He then set numerous magical traps and hid it beneath Gaunt's old house. Entering the abandoned Gaunt house, now overgrown with nettles and practically deserted, he quickly located the ring with a mental scan. Violently breaking through the magical traps protecting the ring, a ring inlaid with a black stone appeared before his eyes. Such a vicious curse, no wonder Dumbledore was also affected. The moment he picked up the ring, a powerful curse erupted from it, spreading towards his hand. However, the holy light rising from George's hand dispelled the dark power. In the original story, after recognizing the resurrection stone on the ring, Dumbledore, burdened by years of guilt towards his sister, impulsively put on the ring, hoping to resurrect her. This resulted in being cursed by Voldemort, ultimately forcing Snape to end his own life to gain Voldemort's trust. However, this level of curse posed almost no threat to him now. If he were to transform into a dragon, the magic resistance of his dragon body alone would be enough to withstand the curse's power. The resurrection stone, which can bring the dead back to life, I'll study it sometime. He picked up the ring, examined it closely, then cast a spell to seal Voldemort's power within, and tossed it into his transformation space. He wasn't interested in Horcruxes, but he was somewhat interested in the resurrection stone, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows. To be honest, of the 3 Deathly Hallows, the resurrection stone was the only one truly interesting. The Elder One's amplification effect wasn't as good as the one he had crafted from his dragon form, and the Cloak of Invisibility offered no special effects beyond invisibility. But the resurrection stone touched upon the laws of life, capable of resurrecting the dead. Although this resurrection was said to have significant side effects, the resurrected person would never be happy and would be driven mad and mentally broken. He had learned necromancy in the mage's apprenticeship world, which also allowed him to return the dead to the mortal realm as spirits. Perhaps studying this resurrection stone would be helpful to his necromancy. The final stop, Gringotts. After obtaining the Hufflepuff Cup, it would be time to go home. Gringotts, touted as the safest place in the wizarding world, with dragons guarding its vault, is actually not that secure for truly top-tier wizards. 2 years ago, Quirrell and Voldemort broke into Gringotts. Had Dumbledore not had Hagrid retrieve the Philosopher's Stone beforehand, it would have been stolen. And for George, Gringotts' defenses are a joke. Chapter 395 Invading Gringotts. Transform. Arriving at Diagon Alley, George used transformation magic to completely change his appearance, then confidently walked into Gringotts. Having learned transformation magic from Fairy Tale, he could now completely transform his entire body. As long as the size difference wasn't too great, he could become anyone, even any object, a magical version of the 72 transformations. However, he hadn't yet reached the highest level where his strength remained unaffected after transformation, but that didn't matter. Even if his strength couldn't be fully unleashed due to the transformation, it was enough to handle any situation in this world. Even an adult with a cold, fever, and weakened body could easily handle a group of elementary school students. Led by the goblin at the entrance, George, transformed into a strange adult wizard, arrived at a counter staffed by an older goblin. "Sir, what do you need?" Astral projection. George silently chanted the incantation, directly controlling the goblin with the imperious charm. "Take me to the Lestrange vault." "You want to see the Lestrange family vault?" "Oh, of course, please follow me." The old goblin, affected by the imperious curse, wore an unnatural smile. He instructed a younger goblin beside him and led George towards a door in the hall. The younger goblin, though somewhat surprised that the old goblin was personally leading a customer, didn't pay much attention and temporarily took over the old goblin's position. Passing through the hall's door, they entered a rough stone corridor illuminated by burning torches and lined with small carts. Led by the old goblin, George boarded a cart and sped towards the depths of the underground. Because no goblins in Gringotts noticed anything amiss, no magical defenses like the anti-thief waterfall were activated, and they easily reached the deepest part of the underground. As expected of one of the oldest families, even a dragon guards the vault. After getting off the cart and walking a short distance, a giant dragon chained with thick iron chains appeared before George. Behind the dragon were Gringotts' 5 most prestigious vaults. The dragon slowly opened its eyes and looked in this direction, about to roar and breathe fire, but seemed to sense something from George, its body instantly stiffening. Then, it cautiously retreated to the most secluded corner of the house where the chains extended, lowered its head, covered its head with its wings, and began to tremble. George wasn't surprised and let the old man continue leading the way to the Lestrange family's vault. Not to mention that he was many levels higher than this dragon after transforming into dragon. Even in his current human form, the restraint he had as a dragon slayer mage against dragons and the unique aura left after slaying many dragons were enough to terrify most dragons in this world. "Open the door." At George's command, the old goblin arrived at the Lestrange family's vault, placed his hand on the door, and the vault door vanished, revealing a hole. Gringotts' vault doors are enchanted by goblins. No non-goblin can open them. Touching the door will cause them to be sucked in, triggering an alarm. George waved for the old goblin to leave and stepped into the hole. Wow, that's rich. The hole was filled from floor to ceiling with galleons, along with various gold goblets, exquisite silver armor, and the pelts of the most valuable magical creatures. Some with spines, others with drooping wings. Rows of high-grade potions were stored in jars, and at the very back was a skull still wearing a priceless crown. He felt he had amassed a considerable fortune through magical creatures over the years, but compared to the oldest Lestrange family's vault, it was nothing. The oldest and most powerful pure-blood family was no joke. A fire curse and a copying curse. He reached for a golden cup, which immediately glowed red-hot and automatically created over 20 identical copies. The Lestrange family had placed a fire curse and a copying curse on their vault to prevent theft. If a thief managed to break into the vault, he would be burned by the contents of the vault and crushed under the gold by the copying curse. End of curses. George waved his hand, erasing all fire curses and copying curses from the vault. Compared to Curse Stop, which seemed to break single target spells, End of Curses was more effective at breaking area of effect spells. The person's gone, so I'll take over. He took a small box from his storage space and collected everything in the vault, including Hufflepuff's golden cup, into it. The only remaining descendant of the Lestrange family was Bellatrix, a staunch Voldemort loyalist, who was currently imprisoned in Azkaban. According to normal procedure, Bellatrix would spend the rest of her life in Azkaban. After her death, all the assets in the Lestrange family vault would naturally become Gringotts' property. It's better to let him have it than let Gringotts profit from it. If Bellatrix were to escape Azkaban in the future, then she would definitely take it. Why let Voldemort have it? After emptying the Lestrange family vault and having the old goblin close the vault door again, the two of them returned to the gate in a small cart. After erasing the old goblin's memory of that incident and adding a memory of him helping ordinary customers withdraw money, George leisurely left Gringotts. He didn't care whether Gringotts would discover the vault robbery because of the old goblin's unusual behavior. At most, it would be reported in the Daily Prophet like Quirrell's infiltration of the vault to steal the Philosopher's Stone 3 years later, but he figured that with a goblin's shrewdness, even if he discovered the vault robbery, he wouldn't make a fuss. If word gets out, people will doubt Gringotts' security measures and become afraid to deposit money there, causing financial problems for Gringotts. Besides, it was the Lestrange family's vault that was robbed, and no one in the family can legally withdraw money from it anymore. Leaving Gringotts, George returned to his original appearance and went back to his shop in Nocturne Alley. Someone was already waiting for him at the shop entrance. "Minister, what are you doing here?" Indeed, standing at his shop entrance was Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge, along with several Aurors protecting him. Fudge immediately put on a fake smile upon seeing George. "George, I've been waiting for you here specifically. There are some things I want to discuss with you beforehand. Please come in." George's eyes darted around, already guessing why Fudge had come to see him personally. He smiled, opened the door, and invited Fudge and the Aurors inside. Chapter 396 The Newly Hired Star. "I understand what the minister means. Don't worry, I know what to say." Half an hour later, at the shop entrance, George smiled at Fudge. Fudge nodded in satisfaction and put his hat on. "George, you're very good. I admire you. Your future in the Ministry of Magic is bright." He had originally thought this trip would be troublesome, worried that George was too inflexible and rigid, but he hadn't expected it to go so smoothly. Although George was young, his speech and manner were no less than those seasoned veterans who had been in the Ministry of Magic for over a decade. Moreover, he could guess Fudge's meaning without Fudge needing to explicitly point it out. His mind was very quick. So Fudge's admiration for George was genuine. He was capable, talented, and knew how to adapt. A wizard like that would definitely do well in the Ministry of Magic, even without Fudge's special favor. To be honest, even without this incident, Fudge would have tried to recruit such a promising talent to his side to strengthen his influence within the Ministry of Magic. Don't be fooled by his position as Minister of Magic. He doesn't have absolute authority. He wasn't originally slated to be Minister for Magic. It was Barty's son's involvement and Dumbledore's recommendation that gave him the position. Therefore, many within the ministry had harbored resentment towards him over the years, especially the faction led by the Deputy Minister. If this matter wasn't handled properly, the Deputy Minister might try to impeach him again, forcing him to step down as Minister. "Then I hope Minister George will take good care of me," George said, narrowing his eyes as he watched Fudge leave Nocturne Alley with the Aurors. Fudge's purpose in speaking to him was simple. His inauguration day at the Ministry of Magic in 3 days was the same day the ministry would hold a press conference. He would be speaking as the ministry's representative, and George hoped George wouldn't let anything slip and would ideally say something favorable to the ministry and to him as minister. George was naturally willing to do this favor, as it clearly demonstrated his allegiance and prepared him for his future role as director of the Office Against the Misuse of Magic. After closing the shop, he began his research on thought form. He had actually been researching this magic for a while, but he wasn't in a hurry to use it, so his progress was slow. After all, he had too many other spells to research. Because he was about to take up a position at the Ministry of Magic, in order not to neglect his magical research while working, he accelerated his research on the thought form spell, and he should be able to complete it in the next couple of days. The thought form spell allows one to create a controllable clone to act, but it also reduces one's own strength by half. In this world, he felt that even with half the strength, no wizard would pose a threat to him, so this weakness wasn't a weakness in this world. However, it wouldn't be as useful in worlds like Middle-earth and Academy City. If the thought form was killed, the original body wouldn't have time to recover, and it would still be dangerous if encountering a difficult enemy. After Fudge and George left, shop owners like those at Vocabro peeked out from the vicinity. How could these wizards who specialized in illegal businesses not notice the Minister of Magic's sudden arrival at Nocturne Alley? They just didn't know what was going on and didn't dare to show their faces. Only now did they realize that Minister Fudge had come to see George. They had assumed George had connections with the Aurors, But to their surprise, he was getting along so well with the Minister of Magic. They were even less likely to provoke him now. Last summer, George's return to Nocturne Alley had already shown the wizards his power, but that was just individual strength. They had planned to join forces this summer to teach him a lesson. Now, knowing that George not only had power but also a powerful background, they dared not offend him again, fearing he might hold a grudge and cause them trouble. I never imagined that Dora, the slave-like child from 2 years ago, would change so much. The shopkeepers exchanged glances before silently retreating to their shops. 3 days later, George, dressed in a suit typical of adult wizards of the time, his hair styled like an adult, carrying a briefcase that was mostly decorative, paraded into the Ministry of Magic. The magnificent hall, the gilded fireplaces, the prominent Magic Brothers fountain, and the busy wizards. Although it wasn't his first time at the ministry, today was clearly different. Today was his first day of work. Upon arriving at the registration desk in the lobby, before George could even speak, the pretty witch at the registration desk smiled and asked, "Young man, do you need any help? I'm George, a recent graduate of Hogwarts, reporting for duty at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." George handed over his letter of application. The witch at the registration desk looked surprised upon seeing the letter. "I'm sorry, Mr. George, you look younger than your actual age. Please fill out this registration form, then take the magical elevator to the second basement level to report." Hogwarts graduates are generally around 17 or 18 years old. Although George was taller than his peers, his face clearly didn't look 17 or 18. Therefore, the witch at the registration desk assumed George looked younger than his age. However, when she saw that George had written his age as 12 on the registration form, her pupils noticeably contracted. Graduating from Hogwarts at 12 and then joining the Ministry of Magic as an assistant in the highly sought-after Department of Magical Law, could this kid be the child of some important figure? Watching George take the registration form and ride the magical elevator to the second basement level, the witch's gossip-loving heart burned brightly, and she began speculating about George's identity with her nearby colleagues. "Have you heard? The minister has an illegitimate son named George, who joined the Department of Magical Law today." "No way. I heard he's Dumbledore's long-lost grandson." "Dumbledore doesn't even have a wife, where would he get a grandson?" "I heard he's the child of Amelia Susan Burns, the head of the Department of Magical Law." "You're so ignorant. Head Amelia has never married either. I only heard she has a niece named Susan studying at Hogwarts. She's a girl, see? I told you he's the minister's illegitimate son. Otherwise, who could pull such a fast one?" In less than an hour, various versions of the rumors had spread throughout the Ministry of Magic. After all, graduating from Hogwarts at the age of 12 and landing the most coveted position in the Ministry of Magic was unheard of since the ministry's inception, so it was bound to raise eyebrows. Therefore, even before George had completed all his onboarding procedures, he had already become a prominent figure among the ministry's lower-level staff. Chapter 397 Little Hero George. On the second basement level of the Ministry of Magic, George stepped down from the magical elevator and passed through two heavy oak doors. An open room divided into several small cubicles appeared before him. This was the Auror headquarters, with an Auror seated in each cubicle. "Hey, George," a group of Aurors, led by Tonks, who used to frequent his restaurant for meals, immediately stood up excitedly and ran over upon seeing George at the door. "I never imagined you'd join the Ministry of Magic, and in the same department as us. If I hadn't checked with the director, I wouldn't have believed it." A few days ago, when she received George's letter saying he was reporting to the Ministry of Magic that day, she genuinely thought he was joking. Although she was at Hogwarts that day, as a newly promoted Auror, she was mainly responsible for perimeter security and didn't know what Fudge and George were discussing. Moreover, she had signed a confidentiality agreement afterwards, prohibiting her from telling anyone what happened that day. Therefore, she didn't know that George had taken the final wizarding exams, graduated early, and was going to join the Ministry of Magic. At the time, she was amazed by George's strength, that he could subdue Sirius Black and a Hogwarts professor. Part of her attention was also drawn to that professor, because he seemed quite agreeable. "Life is unpredictable. I never thought I'd graduate and start working so soon," George said with a hug and a laugh with Tonks. It was fortunate that the wizarding world didn't have laws against child labor, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to start working at the Ministry of Magic so early. After a brief exchange with Tonks and the others, he passed through the Auror office hall and arrived at the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic. This area branched into 3 corridors. A dimly lit and dilapidated corridor led to the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Muggle Items, which housed only 2 wizards, one of whom was Ron's father, Arthur Weasley. Another, noticeably cleaner and brighter corridor led to the Office for the Investigation and Confiscation of Counterfeit Defense Charms and Protective Equipment, which housed a dozen or so wizards. The last corridor led to the Director's Office of the Office for the Prevention of Misuse of Magic, where George would be reporting for duty. The door wasn't closed. After a few steps, a pink, girly room appeared before him. The gaudy lace and cat-related decorations hardly resembled the decor of a proper director's office. Seated at the desk was a middle-aged witch nearing 40, with a broad, sagging face and a small black velvet bow in her short, curly hair. Her pink dress, in particular, was utterly jarring. Being old and ugly wasn't so bad, but an old, ugly woman dressed in such a girlish style was just too awkward. If it weren't for the fact that he was new and eliminating this witch now would prevent him from getting promoted immediately, he would have wanted to get rid of her today. She was simply too much of an eyesore. Of course, how long Umbridge would live depended on her future attitude. If she was as harsh as depicted in the original story, he wouldn't mind eliminating her early. He had plenty of ways to get promoted. Even if he didn't get promoted, it wouldn't matter much. His main goal was to gain experience in the Ministry of Magic, to better learn and understand the magic of this world. Becoming minister would only make his experience more interesting. If he wanted a simple and brutal approach, he could easily emulate Voldemort and use the Imperious Curse to directly control the entire Ministry of Magic's upper echelons. With his abilities, he could even surpass Voldemort in control, but that wouldn't achieve the desired learning effect. "Excuse me, are you Headmaster Umbridge? I'm your new assistant, George." George knocked on the door, and Umbridge looked up with a very fake smile. "George, come in quickly. The minister has already spoken to me." She didn't dare underestimate George, her assistant. The minister had personally come yesterday to instruct her to treat him well, clearly showing great appreciation. Moreover, she had reviewed George's file. He was indeed quite capable, with extraordinary abilities, and was about to receive an award. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that George had a very strong background. Not only did the minister appreciate him, but Dumbledore had also personally written a letter of recommendation, and the deputy director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation had spent a considerable amount of money cultivating relationships with various departments. She had never relied on strength or ability to rise from a lowly cleaning clerk in the Ministry of Magic to the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. It was all about currying favor and flattery. If George were just an ordinary graduate, he would be her personal slave, and any disobedience would be condemned to a life of oblivion within the Ministry of Magic. But George was clearly not, so her attitude had to be different. Such achievements at such a young age? No wonder the minister admires you so much. After completing the onboarding procedures, Umbridge looked at George, her eyes narrowing slightly. Her words seemed like praise, but inwardly she was quite jealous. She thought back to how much she had suffered, how much she had groveled, how much she had sacrificed to reach her current position when she joined the Ministry of Magic, while George, at only 12, was already her assistant. He might even replace her as director. He's a threat too. She wouldn't openly make things difficult for George, but she also wouldn't allow him the opportunity to make a name for himself and replace her in the future, unless she could advance further to director. "George, you're new here, you don't need to do anything. Just get to know your colleagues and I'll call you if anything comes up." Umbridge had another assistant wizard find George a spot in the outer office area, and then left him to his own devices. George was someone she needed to be wary of, but not someone she needed to worry about too much. Her current rival was Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror office. So she was constantly trying to curry favor with the minister, flattering him and trying to figure out his thoughts. George was happy with his leisure time. Although he was only a thought form at work, he didn't want to waste time doing menial tasks. He visited different departments, made friends, and learned about their applications of magic. The morning passed quickly. In the afternoon, just as he started work, the minister summoned him because a press conference was about to begin. Not only were all the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic present, but Dumbledore and Sirius Black, representing Wizengamot, were also there. Now, let's welcome the greatest hero of this incident, our little hero George, Assistant Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the Ministry of Magic. At Fudge's booming voice, countless magical cameras flashed, and George, dressed in a small suit, Step onto the stage. Chapter 398 Public Figure George. As I just mentioned, due to the mistakes of the previous minister, Mr. Black was wrongly accused for 12 years. As the current minister, although the responsibility does not lie with me, I still feel deeply guilty. Fortunately, the Ministry of Magic is not what it used to be. We have been making progress and have the most elite staff who can promptly identify and correct mistakes. Take George, for example. He is a representative of our outstanding staff. He even helped capture the Dark Wizard One Eye while traveling in France and received a medal for bravery. Fudge put his arm around George's shoulder and boasted, ostensibly praising George, but everyone could hear that he actually wanted to express his own excellent leadership as minister. Under the cameras of the major magical newspapers, he concluded, therefore, we have decided to award George the Order of Merlin, second class, and 10,000 galleons as a reward. After Fudge finished speaking, Dumbledore, on behalf of the entire Wizengamer, presented George with the Order of Merlin, and George's direct superior, Umbridge, presented him with the galleons. Then came the interview segment with George by various reporters, and George did not disappoint Fudge, not mentioning at all that he had just started his job that morning, nor did he undermine Fudge. In fact, many people in the Ministry of Magic knew he had started that morning, and many wizards at Hogwarts also knew. These reporters were likely aware of it as well. But it didn't matter. In the wizarding world, where information was disseminated only through newspapers, many things were considered true if the majority believed them, and the minority truths were rarely investigated. What Fudge wanted was for most of the wizarding world to believe that the Ministry of Magic was a reliable entity, and that he, Fudge, was qualified to be minister. That was enough. The next morning, while having breakfast, George saw the Daily Prophet's report on the previous day. The eye-catching headline read, 12 years of injustice cleared by the wise minister and an excellent 12-year-old employee. Sirius Black is actually a hero. The newspaper included two pictures, one of the minister embracing him, and the other of Dumbledore awarding him the Order of Merlin. I guess I'm a public figure now. George smiled slightly as he put away the newspaper. Before, he was only famous at school, and outside of school, he was only known for joining the English Quidditch team, but since he hadn't played any matches, people had forgotten about him. Later, he received the Order of Valor in France, but that was abroad. Not many wizards in Britain knew him. So when he entered the Ministry of Magic, many wizards didn't recognize him. But after this report, he believed that few in the wizarding world wouldn't know him. Firstly, he achieved 12 excellent grades in the ultimate wizarding exams at the age of 12, graduating early and entering the Ministry of Magic, something unbelievable for most wizards. Secondly, the Sirius Black incident had caused a year of anxiety, but George had resolved it, leaving a similar impression. These two things combined were enough to make him a star wizard in the British wizarding world. No wonder he became an assistant in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at such a young age. I knew it. Even if you were the minister's biological son, it's impossible for him to graduate at 12 and start working at the Ministry of Magic. There's really no comparison. My son didn't even get 2 awards of excellence in AL this year, and he's only 12, yet he's already got 12 awards of excellence in Newt and is working at the Ministry of Magic. Don't even mention your son. You yourself can't even use the ironclad charm properly yet, but he subdued Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew. We probably couldn't beat him even if we all joined forces. It's normal that we don't know the ironclad charm. We're clerks, not Aurors. It's abnormal that he could subdue the terrifying Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew at the same time. One escaped Azkaban under the watchful eyes of so many Dementors, and the other blew up an entire street back then. When George apparently back to work at the Ministry of Magic, the entire ministry's opinion of him had completely changed. Yesterday they were discussing which important figure George was from, parachuted into the Ministry of Magic, but today they learned he got in on his own merit, and was directly assigned to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement because of his significant contributions. George only started working yesterday morning, and the press conference started in the afternoon, so the capture of Peter Pettigrew and the exoneration of Sirius Black couldn't have happened after he joined the ministry. The veteran employees who had worked at the ministry for so many years and knew its ways well, knew exactly what was going on. "Good morning, George." "Good morning." Along the way, George noticed many unfamiliar ministry employees greeting him, most with admiration in their eyes. He didn't act arrogantly, and returned the greetings amiably. Don't underestimate these employees. Many hadn't even mastered the ironclad charm yet. Perhaps one of their spells, which they were researching, would be helpful to him. Many ministry employees weren't highly skilled in combat, they weren't Aurors, but that didn't mean they were incapable of studying magic. It's like warriors and scientists. Aurors are warriors, while most of the Ministry of Magic's clerks are scientists. Types like Dumbledore, who combine warrior and scientist qualities, are rare. Think about it, which outstanding student graduating from school wouldn't want to work for the Ministry of Magic? And every year, the ministry selects the best from among the graduates. Over the years, you can imagine how many genius wizards are in the ministry. Perhaps because Fudge became minister, bureaucracy became rampant, and many high-ranking officials lacked ability, but many lower-level employees were quite capable in magical research. Like Arthur Weasley in the most dilapidated office on the second floor, in terms of alchemy and magic, few on the entire floor could surpass him. "Good morning, Mr. Weasley," speak of the devil, and he appears. George, carrying an empty briefcase, stepped into the elevator just as Arthur rushed in. "Oh, good morning, George. Congratulations on your medal and bonus. Ron and Ginny have been talking about you all morning after seeing the paper, and they even asked me to ask when you'd be free to come over," Arthur replied, catching his breath. He naturally recognized George. Last year at the Leaky Cauldron, George had asked him about alchemy, and the two had a pleasant conversation. He just hadn't expected that only a year later George would be his colleague in the same department. "I'll go see them next week when I have a break." "What are you doing lately?" George nodded and began chatting with Arthur. Arthur had his own ideas about alchemy, and visiting the burrow during the break would be a good opportunity to learn from and exchange ideas with him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 Azkaban is bombed. 2 weeks later, George, as usual, sent a thought form to work at the Ministry of Magic. Umbridge hadn't assigned him any work, and he was happy with the leisure, spending his days moving between various departments, absorbing their magical experience and knowledge. He and Arthur studied the various illegal magical items confiscated, worked with a reversal of unexpected magical events team, and observed how they used various spells to handle magical incidents. He learned techniques for erasing and modifying memories from his colleagues at the Memory Erasure Command, and discussed the memory structures deep within the brain. He also observed the research and management of magical creatures by various departments in the Department of Magical Creatures, the manufacture and improvement of various magical vehicles by the Department of Magical Transportation, and the experimentation and research of spells by the Experimental Spells Committee. Basically, he didn't miss any department except the Department of Mysteries, and he did indeed learn a lot of useful things. His colleagues were very polite to him because of his reputation and abilities. Especially when they discovered that George's magical skills were truly superb, and that he could even provide many effective suggestions for their research, they became even more friendly towards him. They repeatedly invited George to leave the tedious Department of Magical Law Enforcement and work for their department. Similarly, thanks to the press conference, public opinion regarding the Ministry of Magic and Minister Fudge finally improved somewhat, with people no longer calling him the most incompetent minister in history. However, this improvement only lasted until today. What's going on? Why is there no one in Auror Hall today? Having just arrived on the second basement level, he passed by Auror Hall and noticed that there wasn't a single Auror there. He asked Arthur, who had arrived a little earlier. Aurors are different from ordinary people. They are on duty 24/7 to ensure timely response in case of problems. And since Arthur is a master of apparition, he usually arrives at the last minute, when Auror Hall is usually packed. "George, don't you know? Something terrible happened. Yesterday, Azkaban prison was blown up by an explosion charm, and all the Death Eaters and criminals escaped. Azkaban was blown up." George's face showed surprise upon hearing this, but he quickly guessed what was going on. There was a Death Eater escape in the original story, but not this year. It happened next summer, after Voldemort's resurrection. Now, because of his influence, Voldemort must have figured out a way to rescue his loyal Death Eaters ahead of schedule. But this is exactly what he wanted. If Voldemort doesn't act, under normal circumstances, it will be difficult for him to get promoted in a few years, especially now that Umbridge isn't giving him any opportunities to work or earn merit. Next, we just need to pay attention to whether Barty Crouch, the director of the International Department of Magical Cooperation, is under the influence of the Imperious Curse to know if Voldemort plans to be resurrected as in the original story. As for Director Barty Crouch, he certainly doesn't intend to save him. With Barty Crouch dead, Amy will be the director of the International Department of Magical Cooperation, which will be very beneficial to him. Moreover, he believes that Barty was not innocent in being killed by his own son, it was his own fault. As a law enforcement officer, knowingly breaking the law, exchanging his Death Eater son, who had committed serious crimes, from prison and secretly hiding him in his home, even going so far as to cast a powerful memory charm on Bertha Jorkins, who discovered the truth. This is like a judge using his power to secretly save his son, who had killed many innocent people and was originally sentenced to life imprisonment. No rush, let the bullets fly a little longer, George thought to himself, and began visiting various departments as usual. However, because Azkaban had been bombed, the wizards in each department were clearly somewhat panicked. Who had rescued the Death Eaters? Who could possibly bomb Azkaban while it was guarded by so many Dementors? Everyone had their own guesses, but dared not speak of them or believe them. Everyone said Voldemort was dead, killed by the miraculously surviving Harry Potter, but no one completely believed that such a powerful and terrifying Voldemort was dead, otherwise, they wouldn't have avoided mentioning his name until now. Similarly, wizards outside the Ministry, upon learning from the newspapers that Azkaban had been bombed and all the Death Eaters and criminals had fled, were also filled with apprehension. Many wizards began cursing the Ministry of Magic and Minister Fudge again. This was far more terrifying and serious than the escape of Sirius Black last year. Fudge held another press conference immediately, claiming that the capture of Sirius Black had mobilized too many Dementors, creating a loophole in Azkaban that allowed the Death Eaters to escape. However, those Death Eaters, constantly fed on by Dementors, were no longer very strong, and the Ministry of Magic would capture all the Death Eaters and criminals as quickly as possible. This brought some peace to the outside world. Now you want me to join the team. According to the agreement, I shouldn't need to join the team until next year, right? On the second floor of the Ministry of Magic, George was approached by Ludo Bagman, the director of magical sports. The situation is special now, Ludo explained to George. You may not know, but this Quidditch World Cup is being held in England. The minister attaches great importance to it and started building the stadium a year in advance. However, our English Quidditch team has performed very poorly this year. At this rate, we'll probably be eliminated soon and miss the finals, but our contract stipulates joining the team next year, and I've already joined the Ministry of Magic, George said, looking troubled. Actually, joining the English Quidditch team now and participating in the finals could bring him fame, and he might even be able to capture a few Death Eaters in the finals. It wouldn't be a bad thing. But he wouldn't agree so easily. He would definitely try to secure more benefits. George, precisely because you're now an assistant to the Ministry of Magic, you should join now. The minister said that if you join now and lead the team to victory, he will give you credit, which will be good for your future promotion. Ludo leaned closer to George and whispered, actually, the situation is not good right now. The minister hopes to use the team's victory to divert everyone's attention. You're smart enough to understand the reasoning behind this. Today, he had to persuade George to join the team, not only because of the minister's needs, but also because he needed it himself. If the finals were held in England and the English team performed poorly, he, as the director, would lose face big time. And based on his understanding of George's skills, as long as George joined, even if they didn't reach the finals, at least a top 6 finish would be highly likely, which would at least allow him to maintain a respectable image. Chapter 400 The Sky City of the Superpowered School. In that case, for the sake of the entire Ministry of Magic, I'll participate. However, only in the Quidditch World Cup, George reluctantly agreed after Ludo's persistent persuasion. The Quidditch World Cup was only a few matches, and given his current physical condition, if he were the Seeker, the match would basically be over as soon as the Golden Snitch appeared, not taking up much time. No problem, as long as you participate in the Quidditch World Cup. Ludo finally breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing George's agreement. He was nearly bankrupt due to gambling recently, and if he couldn't handle this Quidditch World Cup and lose his job, the goblins he had lent money to would probably skin him alive. George looked at Ludo, his eyes darting around. If he remembered correctly, Ludo had a gambling addiction, and had gone bankrupt and lost his job because of it, spending his days hiding from goblins chasing him for debts. He had plenty of galleons. Since Ludo was a compulsive gambler, perhaps he could use galleons to control Ludo and make him work for him. While the Department of Magical Sports and Pedagogy doesn't wield much power within the Ministry of Magic, it's still a large department. If Ludo, as its director, were to become his man, many things would be much easier. He himself is currently in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and will likely soon eliminate Umbridge to become its director. He's familiar with and has good relationships with the head of the Auror office and most of the Aurors. Therefore, he essentially controls most of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Barty, the director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, will eventually be replaced by Amy, meaning the department is also under his control. If he could also control the Department of Magical Sports and Pedagogy, he would effectively control 3 of the 7 major departments of the Ministry of Magic. Moreover, Dumbledore, the chief wizard of the highest-ranking Wizengamer organization, is actually on his side. Just as George was gradually gaining power within the Ministry of Magic using his psychic powers according to his plan, the Marvel Universe itself, due to its rapid advancements in alchemy, was also making significant moves. This island is quite nice, deep in the Atlantic Ocean. George looked at the island below, a satisfied expression on his face. He searched extensively, and the island below, in terms of both its environment and overall size, seemed the most suitable after comparison. Lift. He cast the ancient magic mountain moving charm, lifting the island directly from the sea into the air. He then began a magical transformation of the island using the alchemy he had learned in this world. Primarily using levitation, acceleration, breaking, and flight charms from the Harry Potter world, and various spells from fairy tale for creating magical airships, he incorporated his own understanding of the laws of nature, adding spell-based defensive and invisibility barriers. He also used a considerable amount of vibranium from Wakanda and Uru metal from Asgard, fusing them to create a magical power unit powered by the energy of the Tesseract. This could allow the entire island to fly at supersonic speeds and even teleport. During the previous incident with the Serpent of Terror, when King Black Panther of Wakanda became the messenger of Skyhammer, George's side seized the opportunity. To compensate, Wakanda provided a significant amount of vibranium. Next, it's time to move the school. After spending several days getting everything done, he teleported to his own private space, deliberately left in the very center of the island. This space, originally only the size of a fist, was carved out of a rock beneath the island and then significantly expanded using the unseen stretch charm. The magical power source, created by fusing the space stone with vibranium and Uru metal, was located in this space, which would also be his daily training area. There were no external passages to this space. To enter, one would either have to dig a long hole downwards from the island, piercing through the magical defenses he had set up and the metal walls made of vibranium and Uru metal, or, like him, teleport into the space using special abilities. However, even if someone with special abilities and magic could enter, stealing the Tesseract wouldn't be easy. The device that absorbed the Tesseract was protected by a reinforced magical barrier, and the space was also guarded by numerous monsters he had created using mimicry and transformation techniques, a mixture of vibranium and Uru metal. Of course, these defenses were only effective against enemies below the Skyfather level. They wouldn't be effective against beings like the Ancient One or Odin. However, even if the Ancient One and Odin were present, they might not be able to protect the cosmic magic if the Ancient One and Odin wanted to seize it. Activate. Reaching out, he inputted the magic activation incantation. A large amount of energy from the Tesseract was extracted by Dr. Zola's machine and transferred into the incantation, activating George's special teleportation ability based on the portkey principle. The island over the Atlantic Ocean vanished instantly, appearing directly above the superpowered school. In fact, the entire island could be seen as a giant portkey, only this portkey required a massive amount of energy to activate. If George didn't want to inject his own magic, he could extract and convert the energy of the space stone to activate such a large portkey. At the same time, George also used an awakening charm on the island, trying to give it self-awareness. However, the island was too large, and the development of self-awareness wouldn't be quick. It might take some time. What is that? The New Yorkers, seeing the island suddenly appear in the sky, were terrified. Although the island appeared over schools in the Bronx, its size meant that almost every resident of New York City could see it when looking towards the Bronx. Why were they so afraid? Because just months earlier, Kurt had crashed Sokovia into Washington, D.C., killing many. Similarly, it wasn't just the residents of New York City who were tense, the newly reorganized leadership of the country was also on edge. After the Washington incident, most of the high-ranking officials died, and for security reasons, the reorganized leadership had moved its offices to New York. New York was no less prosperous than Washington, D.C., and it housed Stark Tower and the Superpower Academy. Although they harbored deep resentment towards the uncontrollable Stark and the Superpower Academy, the Washington incident taught them a valuable lesson. When faced with a crisis truly beyond human capability, only those like the Superpower Academy and Tony Stark could save their lives. No one would risk their life. Therefore, seeing an island appear over New York naturally terrified these higher-ranking officials, who feared being crushed like the Washington leaders. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.